Welcome, everyone. This is your friend here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Spider-Man became a homeless hero before meeting Iron Man? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Part 1. A sudden, violent removal. Peter is in the car when it happens, but he doesn't remember anything. The seatbelt, the doctors tell his uncle later, while they think Peter is asleep, broke a few of his ribs, bruised his sternum, and knocked the wind out of him so forcefully it probably also knocked him unconscious the second the car collided with the 18-wheeler. No head injuries though, they assure him. Really lucky, considering the state of the car and its other two passengers. Miraculous when you think about it. No concussion, no brain damage. The memory loss is a result of the blackout, which was a result of a sudden, violent removal of all of the air from his lungs. A sudden, violent removal. Peter might not remember the accident, but he will remember that phrase for a long time. Uncle Ben comes in a moment later and sees that Peter is awake. He freezes in the doorway, a rumpled blur, far enough away that Peter can only imagine how worn out his face must be. The impression of grief is somehow sharper than the reality, makes a sensation like swallowing jagged ice arrive in Peter's throat, and then Uncle Ben takes a step toward him and the reality is worse. Of course it is. That's how grief works. "Hey, Peter," he says. His voice is hoarse. His eyes are red-rimmed. But he's not crying as he sits on the edge of the bed. "You're supposed to be asleep, bud." "Where are my glasses?" says Peter. It's not what he means to say. What he means to say is, "Where are my mom and dad?" But his mouth doesn't seem to be taking orders. Uncle Ben blinks down at him. "I'm gonna have to get you some new ones, I think." "You are." Peter says. "Why isn't my dad going to do it?" Uncle Ben's Adam's apple bobs. "Yeah, but I am. So I'm going home with you." "So they're dead?" Uncle Ben nods. Peter starts to cry. For the first time, it's exactly what he means to do. After the bandages come off and the physical pain recedes, there's a settling PRD. A PRD where the tears, such a welcome relief that first day in the hospital proof that he still had some control over his own body, become a terrible, unpredictable presence, rising up so suddenly and frequently Peter starts to feel like the sadness controls him instead of the other way around. Peter cries when Ben shows him his new room, which isn't really new, because Peter has stayed there when his parents were on business trips and on family weekends, but now it's not the guest room, it's his. He cries when Ben sets a plate of overcooked spaghetti in front of him their first night together. He cries in front of his whole 5th grade class on his very first day, because apparently no one told the teacher's aide why he transferred, and the first thing she does when she introduces him is ask him to tell the class what his parents do for work. A kid named Flash laughs at him for it at recess. Another kid, Ned, tells Flash to eat dirt. It's the one good thing to come out of the day. But there are other times it happens to. Weird times. Times when Peter isn't thinking about his parents or even thinking about anything at all, and suddenly there are hot tears pouring down his cheeks, or he's reaching for his inhaler, his lungs suddenly empty. It happens while he's doing his homework, teardrops turning fractions into smudges of graphite. It happens while he's watching SpongeBob on a Saturday morning. He tries to hide it from Ben. Not all of it, that would be impossible. But the unexplained tears, at least, he tries to cover up by rushing to the bathroom or turning away until they stop. Peter doesn't want Ben to ask why he's crying, because Peter doesn't know, and he's afraid if he can't explain it, Ben will think he's broken. Peter's afraid he might be broken. And besides, he knows Ben didn't ask for this. Peter has always liked Ben a lot. Whenever he would come here before they would watch old black and white horror movies with Ben's wife, or Ben would take him to Coney Island, or they would fix things together in the rusty old storage unit Ben rents in Jersey, but even at 10 years old, Peter knows there's a difference between a day at the fair and having to live with a kid 24/7. Whenever those inexplicable tears rise, Peter remembers something Ben used to say when he would drop him off at the end of one of those weekends. "I do not know how you people keep up with this little Tasmanian devil. Thank goodness I'm allowed to give him back." Ben said it like it was a joke. His parents used to laugh. Peter used to laugh. He thinks he did. But looking back now, he can't quite remember the inflection, And when he tries to recall the expression on Ben's face when he said things like that, the memory Ben's face goes all shadowy, like one of the monsters in those old horror flicks. What if Ben still wants to give him back? So Peter hides this maybe brokenness. He hides it in fogged-up bathroom mirrors and sleeves pressed to his mouth and half-hidden glances when his uncle isn't looking. He hides it while he thinks. Until one day he can't. They're walking down the boys' aisle at Ross. Ben is looking around like a man who's just been suddenly transported to an alien planet, and Peter is trailing after him, running his hands over shirts that are too large because they are in the 10 to 12 section and Peter still wears 7 to 9, even though he will be 11 in just a few months. It's the first time they've had to buy clothes since the accident. This is fine. They're just clothes. Peter has had to buy tons of clothes before, and he'll have to buy tons more in the future. He didn't even like shopping when he used to go with his mom. In fact, he hated it. And this feeling he has, like he's going to become a stranger if he has to give up his old t-shirts someone his parents wouldn't recognize on the street, if they ever saw him, doesn't make any sense, because his parents are dead. It doesn't make any sense, so neither does the fact that right as Ben turns to examine the tag on a shirt with a green cartoon superhero on it, Peter starts to sob. "I'm sorry," he says as Ben drops to one knee in front of him, grabbing him by the shoulders and looking into his face like he expects Peter to suddenly disappear. "I'm sorry." "Peter," says Ben. "Peter, buddy, what's going on? Are you hurt?" Peter shakes his head. The tears on his cheeks are so thick they go flying in every direction. I don't know," he admits when no other words will come. I don't know. He presses his hands to his eyes, knocking his glasses off. Peter hears them clatter to the linoleum floor, but neither of them retrieve them. "Please don't be mad." "Mad?" "Peter, honey, why would I be mad?" Ben has never called him honey before. Peter's dad never used the word. He only ever called him pal or buddy, which is what Ben has done too until now. The strange endearment makes Peter look up. Ben doesn't look mad. He looks scared, tired, but not mad. "I'm sorry you have to do this," Peter whispers, finally. "I'm sorry you have to take care of me." Ben's eyes turn to water. It's scary, and Peter stops crying abruptly. "Honey," Ben says again. "No." Ben tightens his grip on Peter's shoulders. He looks at the floor, just for a second to compose himself, and his tears meet Peter's on the ground. When he looks up, his expression is fierce. "Peter," he says, "what happened to your parents? That was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." Peter flinches. "But you? You're the absolute best. The greatest gift I've ever gotten. I will always want you. Do you understand me?" Things start to get better after that. It turns out Ben knew about the hidden tears. Pretty much all of them. He just wasn't sure what the best way to approach them was. He'd opted for giving Peter space, but after the incident at Ross, he switches tack. "You look sad," he says, whenever Peter gets the distant look on his face that says an episode is arriving. "Do you want to talk about it?" At first, Peter does not. Ben doesn't push, but he also doesn't let him hide. When the tears are silent, they sit together and watch TV, wait for them to peter out. When they're not so silent, Ben hugs him and shushes him, and Peter doesn't even mind that it makes him feel like a little kid because that's how he feels when it happens, and when he feels like that all he really wants is a hug. His parents were never huggers, besides a quick squeeze before bed or after a school play. Peter never resented it or even really thought about it, but he's glad that Uncle Ben is different. He seems to like giving Peter hugs. Sometimes he asks for it even when Peter isn't crying, and after a while Peter stops feeling guilty when he asks for them too. "Are you happy, Peter?" Ben asks him one day while they're both on the couch. The TV is off. They're both reading identical copies of Where the Red Fern Grows, even though Ben's eyelids are drooping from his double shift, because it's Ben's month to lead the parent reading group at Peter's school. "Not really," says Peter, frowning at the book. "It's a super depressing story, Uncle Ben." Ben smiles, and some of the tiredness leaves his face. "Just wait till next month. They're gonna make you read Bridge to Terabithia." He closes his copy, sets it on the coffee table. "But I wasn't talking about the book. Just in general, I guess. Are you happy?" Peter's frown deepens. Ben has never asked him before. He sometimes asks why Peter is sad, but only when he's having a moment. Yeah, he says, nervous. I mean, sure. No, that's not what I meant, Ben says. I'm not looking for any particular answer, Pete. I really want to know. The truth, are you happy? Peter gets that feeling in the back of his throat, the one that usually signifies tears are on their way. He looks at his book, shrugs. Pretends to read in the hope that Ben will drop it. Ben does not. He puts a hand on Peter's book and waits until Peter looks up at him. Peter, he says. You know, grief doesn't have a timeline. You're allowed to be sad as long as you need to be. Peter swallows. I want to be happy though, he says. It's not like I like living here. It's just not your parents' house. Peter nods. Ben takes a breath. I want you to know, he says, that's okay. And if you're feeling sad, you can tell me before it gets bad. My feelings won't be hurt. In fact, it would make me really happy to know you can trust me. Would that be okay? Peter pretends to consider the question for a minute, but really he's just biting down until the razor in his throat goes away and he's able to smile, just a little. You're a weird guy, Uncle Ben. Ben hugs Peter to his side. Sure am, Pete. Peter sort of expects Ben to ease off after their talk, but instead he digs in. Are you happy? He asks, when Peter is putting the final touches on his science fair project. Are you happy? He asks, when Peter emerges, red-eyed, from a particularly long shower. Are you happy? He asks, nearly every day when he arrives home from work. At first, Peter just shrugs. Ben never pushes, at least not in the moment. But the question always comes back, and after a while, without thinking about it, Peter starts to answer honestly. I don't know, he says over dinner, because he isn't sure why the smell of mac and cheese makes him want to run to his room. He will figure out, later, that it's because his mom only made mac and cheese when he was sick, or for his birthday. Not today, he says, on a day when Flash stuffed him in a locker after gym, even though Ned rescued him pretty much instantly. No, he says, on the first anniversary of his parents' death. He says it a lot around that time. But the anniversary passes. Things keep moving. He grows out of all of his old clothes, but he discovers he really likes the ones Ben buys as replacements, which are covered in science puns. Flash continues to torment him after one particularly illuminating health class. He dubs him P.P. Parker, and unfortunately it sticks, but he and Ned get closer, enough that Ned, whose mom is strict, as he puts it, starts spending most afternoons at the Parker apartment. Ben gets better at cooking spaghetti, graduates to burgers, and, eventually, can even make a slightly blackened chicken parm. I'm not so bad, says Peter, when Ben asks after he wins an award for his essay on Bridge to Terabithia. I think so, he says, on his first day of middle school, and Peter tries to pretend he doesn't notice how hard Uncle Ben is trying to control his expression as he waves goodbye. Over winter break that year, Ben takes him to Rockefeller Center to see the tree and to ice skate. Peter's never been. When he was little, he would get sick every time he stayed outside for more than 15 minutes in the winter. But he's grown a lot in the last year, even though he's still the smallest kid in his class, and he's only had a few colds since summer. He's hardly had to use his inhaler in the last 6 months, either, and it's this improvement that makes Ben take the risk, though he still bundles Peter up until he looks like nothing so much as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, one of their favorites, before taking him out. Peter is not a great ice skater. Ben, who played hockey in college, tries his best to coax him through the basics, holding his hands and dragging him upright every time he stumbles. But, unsurprisingly, the general gracelessness with which Peter lives the rest of his life extends to the ice rink, and by the time they break for lunch he's covered in a symphony of little bruises in spite of his 15 layers of clothing. We can go home, Ben offers, approaching Peter where he's waiting on a bench and handing him a cocoa and a hot dog. I promise I won't be offended if Olympic figure skater isn't written in the stars for you. Peter has been looking at the tree, which has to be 5 stories high and is glittering with gold and silver tinsel, brilliant even though it isn't lit. His gaze goes to a family on the ice as he takes the food. The dad is skating backward, dragging his son around while his mom and sister cheer from the sidelines. Me and Ben looked like that, Peter thinks, and even though there's no mom and sister there to clap for him, it doesn't make him want to cry. In fact, it makes him smile. He looks at his uncle as Ben takes a seat next to him, puffing into his mittened hands. "Hey, Ben." "Yeah, bud. I'm really happy." He doesn't mind when Ben looks away, coughing gruffly. He knows, finally, that tears aren't always bad. Uncle Ben was married once. Peter remembers Ben's wife, who was his aunt for a while. He remembers that for a long time she would come with them to all the carnivals and movies, and they would all laugh when either she or Ben tried to make dinner because they were both such bad cooks. He remembers that Ben smiled a lot when she was around, more than he smiles now, even though things are getting easier since the accident. Peter liked her a lot too, but she was gone before Peter came to live with Ben. Divorce, his mom had explained to him. It happens sometimes. It wasn't anybody's fault. She meant it as a comfort. No one fought, so there's no need for you to be scared, but for Peter it had the opposite effect. He wondered if his parents could just happen to get divorced too. If it's no one's fault, could it come at any time? Divorce. A big, neon red word, written on a guillotine in Peter's imagination. For a long time, it felt like the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's a lot less scary now. Still, Peter is 12 years old before he gets up the courage to ask. And then it's not so much courage as it is his inability to shut up, which has become an increasing problem as Peter has gotten older. "Why did you and May break up?" he blurts one night at dinner, and then goes as red as the cherry tomatoes in his wilted salad, at which he immediately and intensely stares. Ben puts down his fork. Surprise, like many of Ben's expressions, appears mildly. He considers Peter for a moment. "Can you always tell when I've been talking to her?" he asks. Peter's ears feel hot. He stirs his salad. "Yeah, you get this look on your face, I guess. And you get all quiet and stuff." Peter shrugs. "Sorry, we don't have to talk about it." But when he glances at Ben's face, his uncle doesn't look mad. "You know," he says, "a lot of really smart kids aren't so great when it comes to emotional intelligence. Why couldn't you be one of those kids?" Peter smiles. "Sorry, Uncle Ben. I guess I'll, try to be stupider." Ben shakes his head and smiles back. "Nah, I like bragging about you too much," he says. The smile fades a little. "That's what May and I were talking about. I was telling her about how they want to bump you up a grade in math." "You guys talk about me?" Ben nods. He's watching Peter's face like he's expecting something, but Peter isn't sure what it is. He's too busy feeling surprised to think about it. "She remembers me," says Peter. "Who could forget an ugly mug like that?" Haha. Peter rolls his eyes. Frowns. "If you guys talk, why did you get divorced? Doesn't talking mean you still like her?" "I do still like her," says Ben. "She's a very special woman." "So why don't you get married again?" Peter can tell right away he's said the wrong thing. Ben's expression doesn't exactly fall, but it does slide a little, becoming fixed. Peter swallows and forces himself not to look back at his plate while Uncle Ben works on his response. "Sometimes," he says slowly, "staying together isn't just a matter of love. Sometimes two people can love each other very much and it just doesn't work out. Does that make sense?" Peter doesn't feel very hungry anymore. He drops his fork and slides lower in his chair. "Peter," says Ben, "I'm not talking about us, buddy. Romantic love is different than what you and I have. We're family. When you get married, you're supposed to be family." Ben is quiet for such a long time that Peter eventually tries to steal a glance at him from under his lowered brow. Ben raises an eyebrow. "Does it bother you that it's just us?" he says. "No." Peter clambers to sit straight. "No, though this is great. I'm not, trying to complain about my life or whatever. It's just..." He chews his lip. "So, you ask me all the time if I'm happy, right? So much it gets annoying." "Hey, I'm just trying. I know. You're making sure I'm okay. It's cool, Uncle Ben. But, are you happy? I mean, I know I make you happy, don't freak out. But are you happy? He shrugs again. "I guess that's all I wonder about." Ben doesn't say anything else. But he does get a little furrow between his eyes, which Peter knows only happens when he's thinking hard. A few months after that, May comes to visit. She only stays for a week, but they go to the beach together, and see a play, and even walk around Times Square in spite of the tourists, because May says she misses New York. Gloucester, where her family lives, is not the same. There are more lobsters than people, she says. All I want is a New York hot dog, and I swear all I can find is lobster rolls. She laughs when Uncle Ben buys her a lobster roll for lunch, laughs harder when he produces the hot dog he was hiding behind his back the whole time. We're just friends, Ben says after May leaves. Uh-huh, says Peter, and he pretends he doesn't notice how much more Ben smiles over the next few weeks. Even when he thinks Peter isn't looking. May comes once more that summer. And twice in the fall. Ben smiles a lot during this time. It's nice, Peter thinks, when they're both happy. After a while, though, May stops visiting. Peter, Ben snaps when Peter asks why for the 1000th time. Not everything has a why, okay? Sometimes things are just hard. That's stupid, says Peter. That's life, pal. Peter slams the door when he retreats to his room. He expects his uncle to come after him, like he usually does. But he doesn't. Early that spring, Uncle Ben loses his job. He finds 2 more to replace it, but the money still isn't as good, and it means he's not home as much. Peter does his homework alone after Ned leaves, and some nights he's too tired to wait up until he hears the click of the door to signify his uncle is home. Just like after his parents died, Peter starts to feel things without knowing why. Except this time, it's not tears that arise. It's a hot feeling in his chest, a stickiness in his throat that feels like it won't go away unless he shouts, and sometimes he does. He shouts when Uncle Ben tells him off for not doing the dishes. He shouts when he can't go on the 8th grade retreat and Ben won't even give him a good reason why. When he isn't shouting, he's quiet. So is Ben. One night, Peter is lying in bed, watching the numbers on his digital clock tick closer to midnight, listening for the door, and he thinks, I don't have to stay here. So he puts on his sneakers, his jacket, and he slips out the back window and down the fire escape, not really knowing where he's going until he's at the 24-hour convenience store around the corner. He buys a Coke and a pack of gummy worms with his allowance, and feels a little thrill when the guy behind the counter doesn't even glance at him as he shoves Peter's change through the bulletproof glass. He takes his prize home and eats it on the fire escape, and when the door finally opens around 1 in the morning, he crawls back through his window and into his bed. But Ben goes straight to his own room without checking on Peter, and a second later he hears the springs in the mattress creak as Ben climbs into bed. For once, it's nice not to think about why he's doing what he's doing. It's nice not to think about how it makes him feel. Peter just leaves. A few months later, Ben is the one who leaves. Peter slips out of the ratty old chair next to the deputy's desk, where he's been sitting for the past 3 hours. The deputy disappeared an hour ago. In the middle of the night, the rest of the bullpen is almost empty. Peter tiptoes past the room's only other occupant, the detective who brought him in, asleep at his desk. He opens the door just wide enough to slip through and head straight for the payphone he saw there earlier, digging a fistful of quarters out of his jeans as he does. Peter had gone to the arcade. The quarters sound like a hammer on an anvil as he drops them into the slot. Ben had been on a night shift. Peter, bolder with his nighttime excursions with each passing week, took a bus to the arcade, not realizing it stopped running at midnight. The finger Peter uses to dial is still crusty with blood. He'd scrubbed as much as he could off on the towel the deputy gave him, but it's under his fingernails. His hands shake as he presses the ancient buttons. Peter only has 2 numbers memorized, and the first one is Ben's. He dials the second. He thought he'd walk home. It wasn't like Ben checked on him most nights, anyway. He could make it home before 3 a.m. if he walked fast. But he'd barely made it 2 blocks before his cell phone rang. "Hello," says a woman's voice on the other end. Peter can't speak. He's been telling police officers what happened all night. Now, when it matters, he can't say it again. For once, Ben's expression was not mild. "Hello," says the voice again. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear you." "Jesus Christ," Ben said when he spotted him. "Jesus Christ, Peter, it's like you have no sense of your own limits. Do you have any idea how dangerous this city can be late at night?" "It's me," Peter whispers. You act like nothing bad's ever happened to me, Peter said, ashamed but covering it in annoyance. You didn't have to come all the way out. I could have walked. The pause. Sorry, say again? Like hell you could have. You're 13 years old. In this neighborhood, past dark? You might be smart, kiddo, but damn it, sometimes you are dumb. It's me. Just a little louder. Peter. Peter? Honey, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night. Where you calling from? Peter swallows. Can you come get me? I thought you said I was smart at everything. Yeah. Ben walked quickly, not bothering to cover his own annoyance. And you act like it means you can do whatever you want. Intelligence isn't just a free pass to make your teachers feel stupid and skip out on studying, or to manipulate me so you can sneak out of my house. Your smarts are a gift, Peter, but any gift is also a responsibility. What happened, Peter? Her voice is sharp, panic rising. Maybe I don't want to be responsible all the time. Maybe I don't like being the biggest dork at school, Uncle Ben. Did you think of that? Maybe sometimes I just want to have fun. Peter's is flat, as dull as hers is dangerous. Ben is dead, he says. Ben turned around, leaving his back open to the dark mouth of the alley up ahead. Responsibility, he said, is not a choice. He got shot. A long, long silence. Peter, I'm coming to get you, okay? I'm coming to get you. A hand falls on his shoulder just as their time runs out. The phone clunks as it drops the call. Peter turns toward the officer's stern but sympathetic face. Your guardians are here, son, the officer says. May never does show up. You'll sleep here. Mr. Arlington tosses the duffel bag onto a twin bed in the corner of the basement, and the springs in the mattress scream their protest. There's a light bulb on a long orange extension cord swinging idly overhead. The laundry machine and dryer are just a couple feet away from the head of the bed. Peter sits next to the duffel bag and says nothing. Mr. Arlington is a short, heavy man with no hair on his head but a lot on his arms, which he crosses over his chest as he stares down at Peter. He seems to be waiting for Peter to say something, but Peter's mind is completely empty, an endless plain of scratchy white. No thank you then, says Mr. Arlington after a while. Is this just what I should expect from here on out? Peter doesn't even have the energy to feel indignant. He shrugs. Mr. Arlington scoffs and stomps up the stairs. When he reaches the upper floor of the condo, Peter tracks his progress from the living room to the kitchen by watching the dust that trickles through the floorboards his ceiling. Mr. and Mrs. Arlington are his cousins, they told him at the station, though probably a few times removed. His last living relatives. A real beach to track them down, according to the deputy. They've agreed to take Peter in while everything is sorted out. Isn't that nice of them? What do they have to sort out? Peter wanted to know. All kinds of things. Uncle Ben's will. What will happen to his apartment, his things. Where Peter is going to spend the rest of his life. The rest of his life. The concept feels just as scratchy and blank to Peter as his other thoughts. He lays down on the twin bed and immediately sinks into the deep indent at the center of the ancient mattress. Reaches automatically for his phone, then realizes it was taken into evidence, because it was covered in blood. He can't call May again. He doesn't know if he would anyway. He already feels hot with shame at their earlier conversation, shame that boils over when he remembers how he stared at the doors to the precinct while he waited for the officer who gathered his things to come back with them and hoping harder than he'd ever hoped for anything that she would appear. But why would she? Besides those few weeks last year and a few sporadic weekends in his childhood, they barely know each other. Just because Peter likes her doesn't mean she would want it. Peter rolls over, lets the thought roll away as he does. His duffel bumps against his knees, but he can't bring himself to look inside yet. They didn't even let him pack his own things. Eventually there are footsteps at the top of the stairs, but they don't come further than the landing. There is a click. The swinging bulb goes out, leaving Peter in the dark. He waits for the tears to come, like they did with his parents. Instead, two thoughts, black as iron, come jolting out of the white. The first, Uncle Ben is dead. The second, it's my fault. He doesn't sleep for a long time. The cousins don't tell Peter anything about themselves. He doesn't know what they do for work. He doesn't know if they have kids of their own. He doesn't even know if they're married or if they're brother and sister, though he leans toward the latter. They have the same foreshortened stature, like someone cut them off at the knees, the same manner of crossing their arms over their chests when they look at him. Dinner is at 6 every evening, Mrs. Arlington tells him. If you miss it, you wait until breakfast. No snacking between meals. School provides a lunch for kids like you, so you'll take advantage of that, got it? This is how she introduces herself. While she talks, Mr. Arlington comes stumping up the basement steps, carrying Peter's duffel bag. He drops it on the floor in front of Mrs. Arlington and the pair of them rifle through it, musing up Peter's neatly folded clothes. Peter watches them silently, with an intense feeling that he is not here in this dusty, ancient apartment, but rather somewhere very far away, somewhere outside of New York. Maybe a different planet. He's still wearing the clothes they gave him at the precinct. They're too big and smell like mildew. He watches the clothes that Uncle Ben bought for him pile up at his feet, but can't bring himself to touch any of them. There's still blood under his fingernails. The cousins pocket his wristwatch, the debit card Ben gave him for emergencies, which has about $100 on it, and a 90s era Nintendo Game Boy the officer must have grabbed off of Peter's desk. Peter doesn't tell them it's worthless. He plucked it out of the garbage weeks ago, thinking he and Ben might fix it together, but he and Ben had been going through one of their silent PRDS ever since, so it still doesn't work. When the bag is thoroughly overturned, the cousins sit back, wearing identical expressions of disappointment. Mr. Arlington tosses the duffel bag at him. Peter stumbles as he catches it. "Go take a shower," he says. "I called the school this morning, they're setting you up. If you hurry you can make a half day." Peter goes to the bathroom. He hopes the shower covers the sound of vomiting, which lasts a long time. The middle school in this neighborhood is underfunded and overcrowded. Half of his teachers don't even notice they have a new student, too busy trying to control the daily chaos. Peter spends his first half day bouncing off of other students' shoulders in the hallway, keeping his head down to avoid stares and jeers and not realizing why he's getting them until he ducks into the bathroom before 7th PRD and sees his face in the graffiti-covered mirror. It's deathly pale, and his cheeks are streaked with tears he didn't know were happening. Uncle Ben is dead. It's my fault. Peter wipes his face and heads back into the halls, which are crowded with strangers. About a week after he goes to live with the cousins, they get a visit from Peter's social worker. When she arrives, Peter feels a little flare of hope, the first identifiable emotion he's had since that night outside the alley. Surely she'll see that his bed is at least 50 years old, and that the clunk of the pipes over it keeps him up all night. Surely she'll notice that the cupboards are nearly bare but the liquor cabinet is fully stocked, that the meals the cousins do give him are all TV dinners, that the whole duplex smells like cat litter. She'll see and she'll send him somewhere better, a proper foster family. But the social worker doesn't say anything as she totters around the apartment. She's middle-aged and has a slight limp, and somehow she looks more exhausted than Peter feels. When she examines his corner of the basement, she merely nods and ticks something off on her clipboard. Peter thinks she will say something about the fridge, but when she opens it, someone has filled it with food and she nods again. "Well, Peter," she says when she's finished, already pulling her jacket on as she heads for the front door, "your cousins have agreed to sign a temporary guardianship agreement, so it looks like you can stay here for a while. I'll get everything drawn up. Do you need anything before I leave?" She looks from Peter to the cousins, who are standing on either side of him like squat caricatures of the royal guard, with an expression on her face just short of pleading. "I think we're just fine," says Mr. Arlington, squeezing Peter's shoulder. The social worker sags with relief and beats a hasty retreat, before any of them can change their minds. "Are you happy, Peter?" No one is coming to save him. The kids at Peter's new school hate him. Within a few weeks he's established himself as a know-it-all, totally accidentally. But the classes here are all a few grade levels behind what he's used to. Peter wouldn't be able to fail them if he tried. He doesn't want to try. Schoolwork is the only distraction he has, because the cousins don't have a computer, or even any books, and Peter finds that when he isn't distracted his mind starts to hum like it did that first night, that white space taking on a sharp edge that is too untenable for him to examine. He gets shoved in the hallway between classes. A girl a foot taller than him smacks his lunch out of his hands every day if he doesn't get to a table and scarf it down fast enough. A boy who must have been held back at least 3 times judging from his beard full-on punches him in the face while they wait for the bus one afternoon. Doesn't even offer an explanation. Just breaks Peter's glasses and possibly his nose, and gets on the bus. Despite all this, school becomes Peter's refuge. The cousin's duplex he can't stomach the thought of calling it home is the worst place Peter has ever been. Never mind that he barely sleeps, or that he goes to his creaky, awful bed with an empty stomach every night, or that the cat smell is starting to seep into his clothes, making him even more of a target at school. It's the tension that makes it unbearable. Mr. Arlington seems to have some sort of job, because he's usually not there when Peter gets home from school. Mrs. Arlington, on the other hand, does nothing but sit on the couch all day watching soap operas, taking breaks only to shuffle into the kitchen to make another screwdriver, which is her drink of choice. Once, Peter tried to sit on the couch to do his homework, the light in the basement being too dim, and upon finding him there she smacked him across the back of the head with a rolled-up Cosmo. "You're blocking the TV," she slurred, and it took all of Peter's self-control not to run as he headed back to the relative safety of his underground bedroom. In spite of Peter's immediate retreat, Mrs. Arlington seems to get a taste for hitting him after that. She takes to carrying a magazine around with her wherever she goes. If she catches Peter in the kitchen, smack. If he forgets to take his shoes off at the door, smack. If he misses one of his chores, laundry, cat litter, scrub the toilet, sweep the floors, wipe the dust off the television, smack. It never leaves a mark. It does leave Peter with an achy nervousness that never goes away when he's in the apartment, because he's always waiting for the next blow to fall. When Mr. Arlington gets home in the evenings, he and Mrs. Arlington scream at each other for a while before they go to bed. Peter is usually in the basement at this point, but it always makes the ache worse, makes it that much harder to fall asleep while he stares at the trails of dust moving across the ceiling. "Are you happy, Peter?" "No," Peter thinks. "Then, but that's my own fault, isn't it?" Pissed. Peter is walking back to the Arlingtons from school. He doesn't take the bus anymore, partly because of the bearded boy, but mostly because it gets him there too quickly. He glances over his shoulder, thinking Abby might be following him. Nothing. He resumes walking. PSSSD. Peter turns around. This time, Ned Leeds' round face materializes from behind a dumpster. "Ned." "Shoo." Peter blinks a few times, thinking he's crazy, but it's definitely Ned. He's wearing his Midtown Middle School gym t-shirt and carrying the lunchbox Peter got him for Christmas last year, which has a picture of the Hulk, Ned's favorite superhero, and says, "Hulk Smash Lunch," in bright green letters. Peter stares. "What are you doing here?" he says blankly. Ned glances over his shoulder, then jerks his head at a nearby alley, and Peter follows him down it automatically, with the surreal feeling that he has somehow stepped into a vivid dream. Only when they are safely concealed behind a second set of dumpsters does Ned round on him. He pulls Peter into a bone-crushing hug. "Oh my God," he says. "Oh my God, Peter, I'm so sorry about Ben." Peter only realizes how stiffly he's been holding himself for days, for weeks, since Ben died when he finally releases, melting into Ned's shoulder like ice on warm concrete. It takes a second to hug back, but when he does, Ned squeezes tighter, and doesn't let go until Peter does. They break apart, and Ned looks Peter up and down, face falling. "Dude," he whispers, "you look terrible." Peter looks down. Now that Ned mentions it, his clothes do look especially large on him, but he hasn't noticed until now. "Why are we whispering?" he says when he looks up. Ned glances over his shoulder again. "I'm not supposed to be here," he says. "I told my mom I'm going to the decathlon team meet and greet at the high school, so I guess now I have to join decathlon next year, but actually I took the bus." "And you think your mom is going to overhear us?" "Here. Dude, you know my mom has ears freaking everywhere. I'm pretty sure I saw her standing over me in my bed the other night, just breathing. She was probably waiting to hear what I say in my sleep." Something strange is happening to Peter's face. It feels tight all of a sudden, but not in an unpleasant way. It takes him a second to realize he is smiling. "How did you know where to find me?" he asks. It was not easy, actually. Did you know your phone's been disconnected? So I went to Principal Sanders, but all she said was that you transferred and she didn't know where. Then I tried to call the police station, but they wouldn't tell me anything, so I emailed CPS, but they were all like, who wants to know, don't bother us again, so I had to find a backdoor into their servers and steal the address of your foster family, and then I had to figure out my cover story. You did all that? Peter says. Ned, that's seriously impressive. Ned waves him off. Peter, why didn't you try to get in touch with me? My phone. Yeah, it's the 21st century. Ever heard of a computer? Peter's smile slips. He looks at his shoes, which are nearly too small for him now, though he can't imagine asking the Arlingtons for new ones. The truth is, he thought about emailing Ned those first few weeks. There are computers in the school library, even though they're about 10 years old and chained to the desks with steel bike locks. But every time he logged onto one, he just sat there, too frozen to even open his inbox. Peter says, then shuts his mouth and stares at Ned until his friend's expression of slight irritation gives way completely to worry. Peter, he says. What has been going on, dude? Peter's tongue comes unstuck in his throat, but what comes out of his mouth is stupid, obvious, and not the answer Ned is looking for. Ben died, he says. Ned's expression falters again. It was my fault. Saying the words aloud is like reciting a charm. It ends the terrible curse of silence and numbness and stillness which, more than the Arlingtons' duplex, has been Peter's prison these last weeks. But it is not a relieving freedom. It's like all of the blood is rushing back to a limb that was nearly dead from lack of circulation, and the all-over prickling of grief and shock and anger arriving all at once sends Peter to his knees. It was my fault, he sobs, covering his face with his hands. It was my fault, Ned. He's dead because of me. He doesn't even realize that Ned's hand is on his back until the sobs subside, which feels like it takes a long time. When he finally looks up, taking deep, hiccuping breaths, Ned is crouched beside him, and there are tear tracks on his face not as inflamed as Peter's, but still shining in the waning daylight. Come on, he says. Ned hooks an arm under Peter's and hauls him to his feet. Peter doesn't ask where they're going, just follows, stumbling slightly in his too tight sneakers and not looking up until they are in a pizza joint and Ned is at the counter, speaking to the cashier. Ned orders 4 slices, hands 2 to Peter, and they sit on the curb outside of the shop, watching floods of late-afternoon commuters pass by. The pizza is terrible, but the saltiness replenishes what was lost in his tears, and Peter hasn't had a meal this large since he moved. Ned even gives him his second slice, and only when he is so full it's uncomfortable does Peter start to talk. He tells Ned about his late-night trips out of the house. He tells him how Ben came to get him from the arcade that night. How they fought. How his uncle stepped in front of him when the mugger appeared in the alleyway, but Peter, nerves frayed from all the shouting, lurched forward almost on instinct, as if he could stop the gun emerging from the man's jacket. How the man had startled, and there was a flash, and then Ned swallows as Peter falls silent. Your foster parents, he says. Are they being nice to you? Peter laughs bitterly, shakes his head. I deserve it though, he says. If it wasn't for me, Ben never would have been out that night. If I hadn't... Peter looks up. Ned looks aghast. You do not, Peter, that was so not your fault. And even if it was, which it wasn't, if they're not treating you right, that isn't cool. It's not okay. You need to tell someone, Peter, you need to do... Who am I supposed to tell, Ned? My social worker just says things are adequate when she comes. And they are adequate, I guess. I mean, they feed me and I go to school and... Do they hit you? Peter flinches. Peter. They don't. Peter tries to backtrack, but Ned already looks scandalized. It's not really hitting. It's just, they push me around sometimes, when I'm not, it's not like they actually hurt me. Ned sets his half-eaten pizza on the sidewalk, looking nauseous. You have to get out of there, man. Peter laughs bitterly. And go where? Maybe my parents. Peter's raised eyebrow slices through the rest of Ned's sentence. Fine, so not that. But there has to be somewhere. That's like, against the law. CPS has to find you a good home. I don't think they have to do anything, Ned. Ned gets to his feet so abruptly that Peter startles and nearly drops his own plate. "Peter," he says, and Peter has never heard Ned's voice so stern. Almost like an adult's. "What do you think Ben would say if he know how they were treating you? Do you think he'd want that?" "No way, man. You were like the best thing that ever happened to him. He even told you so." "That was before I got him killed," says Peter, sharper than he means to. But Ned doesn't back down. "I knew Ben too," he says. "And that's bullshit. He loved you, Peter. Of course he followed you, because that's what responsible parents are supposed to do. He wouldn't regret that. But this." He gestures at Peter, scrawny and pathetic with his broken glasses and increasingly threadbare clothes, face still swollen from crying. "Ben would never, ever want this for you, dude." Back in his basement corner that evening, dryer clanking next to his head like it's full of silverware instead of towels, Peter listens to his uncle's voice play over and over in his head like scratched vinyl. "Are you happy, Peter?" the phantom Ben says. "Then you're the best thing that ever happened to me." Upstairs, a door slams. Not everything has a why. Sometimes things are just hard. Mr. Arlington starts to shout. His words are lost beneath the clamor of the dryer, but he sounds especially virulent tonight. A second later, Mrs. Arlington's rises to join his. Ned's voice joins Ben's. That's what responsible parents are supposed to do. Would Ben really hate him? For the last 2 months it seemed like a given, but tonight he isn't so sure. A third voice joins the shouting upstairs. It's unintelligible, but it sounds like a woman. The neighbor must have come to yell about the volume on the TV again. "You don't have to let him push you around, Pete," says Ben, handing Peter an ice pack. Peter presses it to his elbow, bruised from when Flash slammed the locker on him. "Why do you?" "It's just easier," says Peter, shrugging. "I know for a fact you told him off for calling Ned names last week. Mrs. Leeds called me." Peter smirks, even though his elbow is throbbing. "To tell you what a hero I am? To tell me that if my kid gets hers in a fight ever again she'll have you hauled away to juvie." But I read between the lines. They share a grin. Ben's fades first. "I don't get it, pal. You'll defend Ned but not yourself." Peter sighs. "It's just different when it's someone else. It's easier. I don't know why." Ben's expression goes fierce, like it only does on the rarest occasions. "You," he says, "are allowed to defend yourself. You're just as important as anyone else, Peter Parker. And don't you forget it." The memory fades. So do the voices upstairs. Responsibility is not a choice. The door slams again. The fight is over. Peter starts checking his email after school. It takes just a couple of days to work out a system. Ned has some allowance saved, which he uses to buy Peter a bus pass, and Peter starts spending 2 nights a week riding between Queens and his new school, because the Arlingtons don't care what time he gets home so long as he doesn't ask for dinner when he misses it, whereas Ned's mom would throw a conniption if she knew how her son was spending his Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Through a small PRD of trial and error, they discover that Midtown High is the least conspicuous place to meet up. The doors are open for after-school activities, and all the students are so nerdy no one questions the extra pair of dorky teens hanging around, meaning they have free reign over the school's many expensive amenities. He and Ned build Lego sets in the band room, blow things up in the chem lab, and shoot hoops in the gym. Peter even uses the shop tools to solder his broken glasses back together. Ned sneaks him food to bigger meals than he would get at the duplex. And as long as he's not there, there's nothing for Mrs. Arlington to hit. Life gets better. Bearable even. "I wish I could come here with you next year," Peter says as they leave the school one evening. "I visited my high school last week. It totally esicas. They don't even have AP science classes." "Dude," Ned groans. "Not even like AP bio? I don't even know if they have regular bio. That seems like a human rights violation." It's nearly summer. Normally Peter would be excited for languid afternoons spent playing video games with Ned and trips to Coney Island with Ben, but this year the thought of school ending fills him with dread. He knows he can't spend all day with Mrs. Arlington, but he doesn't know where else he'll go. Ned's mom has signed him up for 4 different preparatory summer camps, and he'll be gone almost until the new semester starts. Maybe you can talk to Principal Morita, says Ned. I met him at one of the decathlon things last year. He seems really cool. Apparently his grandfather was a howling commando, so he practically knows Captain America. You think Captain America can get me into Midtown? I bet he would actually. He'd be all like, science is cool. Without science, where do you think I'd be? They laugh. Even Peter's school uses the corny Captain America PSAs. But for real, says Ned as they approach the bus stop, I bet Morita'd make an exception. You already take the bus here, don't you? If they'd waive tuition. Which they would do because you were the smartest kid in school. Dude, now that I think about it, they would probably beg you to come back. You should ask. Or I can ask for you. Orientation is in July and... The bus is here. Peter glances over his shoulder at it, mostly to hide the little flame of hope that has kindled in his chest, his increased heartbeat. Maybe Ned is right. His grades are still good, and the cousins don't care what he does as long as it doesn't cost them any money. He already has the bus pass. Yeah, he says as the bus doors hiss open. Yeah, that would be really good actually. Just, how cool would it be to see each other every day? It would be awesome. Peter mounts the bus steps. See you next week? You know it. For the first time since Ben died, Peter arrives at the duplex smiling. It doesn't last. Where the hell have you been? Peter startles as he closes the door behind him. He expected the cousins to be asleep, like they usually are at this hour, but both are awake and dressed in their street clothes. Even Mrs. Arlington, whose regular uniform is a tartan bathrobe and house slippers, is wearing a horrible yellow polka dot dress. Peter's heart sinks. There's only one reason Mrs. Arlington gets dressed up. Your social worker just left, says Mr. Arlington. Do you have any idea how stupid you made us look? I'm sorry, says Peter, already shrinking to press his back against the door. I didn't know she was coming. Does Mr. Parker frequently stay out past dinner without telling you where he's gone? Mrs. Arlington's rasp sounds nothing like the social worker, but there's no doubt who she's impersonating. That beach looked at us like we were derelicts. As though we haven't let you live here on our dime, eating our food, using our things like they're your own. The achy feeling arrives more painfully than it usually does, and Peter's breath hitches as Mr. Arlington takes a step toward him, nearly closing the space between them. You'd almost think, he says as Mrs. Arlington steps up behind him, you aren't grateful for our hospitality. Are you grateful to be here, Parker? It takes Peter too long to realize that he should answer yes. He stares at his cousins, mouth shut, trying to breathe through his nose as the ache in his chest turns tight, and by the time their eyes go wide with fury it's too late. They both lurch toward him, but Mrs. Arlington is faster, elbowing Mr. Arlington out of the way and grabbing Peter by the shoulder with a stubby hand that is nevertheless surprisingly strong. She shakes Peter so his head knocks against the door, and he is this in a wheezing gasp. Asthma, he thinks. He hasn't had one in over 8 months, but he recognizes it like he recognizes his own reflection. But before he can say anything, Mrs. Arlington shakes him again, and this time he hits the door with enough force to make the door shake, his head sparkle with sulfuric pain. Do you have any idea what we've gone through to have you here, boy? She hisses. The bullshit we've had to put up with, especially with that CNT descending on us. I need my... Shut up. Peter's inhaler is in his duffel bag. His duffel bag is in the basement, but Mrs. Arlington's hand is digging into his shoulder hard enough that Peter's eyes start to water, or maybe that's because it's getting harder to fill his lungs, which are starting to feel like crumpled paper sacks. The money. The food. You, skulking around here like some weepy little goblin, like you don't care how expensive you are, like you don't care that we're barely compensated for our generosity. Beyond his shriveled lungs, something in Peter's chest snaps. Expensive, he wheezes. You barely even feed me, how expensive can I be? Mrs. Arlington is so shocked she lets go of him. Mr. Arlington steps forward. Listen, boy. But before he can do anything, Mrs. Arlington slaps Peter across the face. Peter's hand leaps to his cheek. His lungs are empty. Mrs. Arlington's eyes bulge, making her look more toad-like than ever. Before he can open his mouth to try, once again, to speak the need for his inhaler, she slaps him again. "How dare you!" she shrieks. Another strike. "How dare you! How dare you!" Peter raises his arms to cover his head, choking on a plea, but Mrs. Arlington is beyond reason, and Mr. Arlington, when Peter catches a glimpse of him between blows, looks uncomfortable but makes no attempt to intervene. "Stop," Peter gasps. "Stop. Stop." He flings his hands out, only meaning to catch her arm as it descends again, but instead his hands meet Mrs. Arlington's fleshy chest, and before he can stop himself, Peter shoves. Mrs. Arlington stumbles. She rocks back on her heels. For a second her arms windmill through the air almost comically. Then she topples, landing on her ample backside with a soft flump. Everyone stares down at her, wide-eyed and silent, while she stares up at Peter. She starts to scream. Peter doesn't hesitate this time. As Mr. Arlington kneels beside his shrieking partner, Peter vaults over them both, running for the basement door, ignoring Mr. Arlington's shouts for him to stop. He pauses just long enough to wedge the doorstop underneath the door from the inside, then practically tumbles down the rickety wooden steps in his haste to overturn his duffel bag and snatch his inhaler out of the detritus that comes tumbling out. His lungs fill with albuterol first, then air. Upstairs, the screaming goes on. "You were wrong, Uncle Ben." It's maybe the millionth time he's thought it since he came here, but he can't seem to stop. Like he has mental Tourette's, the thought just bursts out of his brain 5, 10, 50 times a day. While he's scrubbing dishes. While he's bouncing the half-deflated basketball off the back wall with Felipe. While he's clicking aimlessly through homeschool courses in the musty attic, where Miss Charlize keeps the computer. He thinks it now, staring at the snapped cross support on the bunk above his and half hoping the whole thing will just collapse on top of him. It probably wouldn't kill him. Springs creak. The support groans, but holds. Felipe's face looms out of the darkness over the side of the top bunk. "Hey, S.A., he whispers, "you awake?" Peter props himself up on his elbows. "I'm always awake, man. What's up?" Felipe jerks his head at the other bed. Across the minuscule space of the bedroom, a second set of bunk beds holds just one occupant. Peter gropes for his glasses and sees that said occupant is curled on his side, facing the wall and shaking with silent tears. He sighs, looks at Felipe. Felipe shrugs. "You got the golden touch, my man," he says. "I'll just make things worse." "Yeah, I got it." Peter gets out of bed, crouches next to the other one and whispers, Hey, new kid. You okay?" The new kid rolls over, tears shining in the moonlight filtering through the window, which has no curtain. He startles when he sees Peter and tries to press himself against the wall. Peter holds his hands up. "Whoa," he says. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to make sure you're all right. Are you all right, kid?" Felipe drops to the floor behind Peter. The new kid's wide eyes flicker toward him, reflecting fear, but Peter holds his own gaze steady until the kid meets it and shakes his head. "I don't know," he whispers. The new kid arrived after dinner, dropped off by his CPS worker and a cop right as the other boys, Peter included, were getting ready for bed. Just like Peter was 6 weeks ago. Yeah, that's how most people feel on their first night. "You got a name?" "Arnold." Felipe whistles dubiously, but silences himself at Peter's glare. "Hey Arnold, I'm Peter." Peter offers a hand and Arnold takes it nervously. This is Felipe. He's not as much of a D as he seems. "Hey, I take offense at that, Pedro. I'm hung." He is disgusting though. Peter rolls his eyes and turns back to Arnold. "How old are you?" 11, Arnold says, voice so small it's almost inaudible. Yikes. Felipe crouches next to Peter on the floor. 11 years old and practically in the big house? "What did you do to get here, Arnaldo?" It's Arnold." "Nah, I'm pretty sure it's Arnaldo." "That's just Felipe, Arnold, ignore him." Felipe holds his hands out, innocent. "Hey," he says, "if I gotta spend the rest of my life getting called Philip by gringos, some of your gringos are gonna go by your Spanish names, comprende? Believe it or not, that means he likes you." Felipe grins at Peter, then looks back at Arnold. So, Arnaldo, what did you do? Knife a guy. Arnold shrugs and looks at his hands. No need to be modest, my man. You want to hear how we got slapped with this sentence? See, I'm a victim of an unjust system, Peter snorts. But Pedro here? He's a mad dog. Real crazy. He should probably be in Supermax, but he turned those big brown eyes of his on the officer that arrested him, and instead they sent him here to put the rest of us in the line of fire. Can you believe that? Arnold looks at Peter, shrinking back again but at the same time looking doubtfully at Peter's narrow shoulders, his mussy, too long hair, and his pallid skin. Peter rolls his eyes again. He's lying, Arnold. I sure as hell ain't, says Felipe. Mad Dog Pedro pushed an old lady down some stairs, Arnaldo. Just 'cause he fucking felt like it? There were no stairs. That's what the police report said though. I keep telling you, my man, you gotta own it. Mark your territory. Older kids aren't gonna F with you if they think you kill old ladies for fun. And yet somehow I don't want that to be my reputation, says Peter. If marking territory is so important, why have you never told us what you did, Felipe? Felipe whistles again, lowly. Like I said, he says. Victim of the system. Says Arnold. They both turn to look at him. Is the food good here? He asks. They didn't give me dinner. At the station, I mean. And when I got here. Peter glances at Felipe just as his bunkmate's expression goes dark. You stick with us, Arnold, says Peter, and you're gonna be just fine. You should get some sleep, okay? Peter gets to his feet. Felipe looks like he'd like to say something else, but Peter shakes his head and Felipe closes his mouth and climbs back into the upper bunk, scowling. Peter gets back into his own bed, takes his glasses off, stares at the broken support. You are allowed to defend yourself, says Uncle Ben, his voice as loud as it is silent. You were wrong, Uncle Ben, Peter whispers. Uncle Ben doesn't reply. Now that Arnold is here, there are 5 boys at the halfway house, including Peter. Justin is tall and black and almost 18, and as such he doesn't talk much, staying out of trouble until his birthday, according to Felipe. Ryan is nearly as silent, though white, and as broad as Justin is tall. But where Justin's silence is brooding and solitary, Ryan seems to be a result of extreme stupidity, and is punctuated only by an occasional random fist, if one is unlucky enough to catch him alone in the hallway or the living room. The first thing Felipe did when Peter arrived at the house was warn him to stay out of Ryan's way, so that's the first thing Peter does for Arnold as they walk down to breakfast the next day. Sure enough, Ryan scowls as the 3 of them troop into the kitchen, and Arnold hurries to take the seat furthest from his at the table. Justin is nowhere to be seen, but Mr. Leonard is there, and Karen is leaning over the stove, and she smiles as the younger boys take their seats. Good morning, boys, says Karen, while Ryan remains silent. Karen and Mr. Leonard are the Monday, Wednesday, Friday day shifters. Mr. Leonard mostly stands in the corners, staring at his phone, but Peter likes Karen. At 19 she is almost as short as Peter, black, and a little chubby. Karen wears a constant smile and is the only provider who doesn't talk to the boys like they're sewer scum. She's the one not horrible part of living in the halfway house, which has been Peter's home since the Arlingtons surrendered custody. Even though they decided not to press charges after the officer in charge of Peter's case cited the average court fees for a case like Peter's, interestingly enough just the accusation of felony assault, which, according to the Arlingtons, was what Peter committed, can't be expunged from his record until he's 18. The lack of a conviction makes no difference. There are very few foster families who want to take 14-year-olds as it is, but there are even fewer willing to take 14-year-olds who have been accused of shoving women down flights of stairs. So they sent Peter here. If someone had told him just 2 months ago that he would miss living with the Arlingtons, Peter would have laughed in their face. But that was before he'd been introduced to halfway house living. There are no more excursions to see Ned. There are no more excursions PRD, because the boys aren't allowed to leave the premises, except for chaperoned field trips every other weekend, which usually means that the boys who have outgrown their clothes go to Goodwill with one of the providers. Peter doesn't even know if Ned knows where he's gone, because besides the homeschool website, which they visit in turns, the internet is fully blocked on the ancient computer in the attic. And even though they get 2 supervised phone calls on the house phone each week, Peter never memorized Ned's number like he did Ben's. And May's. He called her again once, his first week here, only to discover that her number had been reassigned. Peter hung up before the old man who acquired it could finish telling him he had the wrong one, then spent the next 2 weeks biting his knuckles against the shame of having made the same mistake again. Somehow, the isolation and the boredom and the confinement aren't the worst parts. The worst part is this it? Ryan grunts as Karen places a plate on the table in front of him. Loath though Peter is to agree with Ryan, today's breakfast is especially pitiful. It consists of a single hard-boiled egg and a half piece of wheat toast, unbuttered. Karen grimaces. Sorry guys, she says, sounding genuinely apologetic. They haven't adjusted for the new guy yet, it might be slim pickings for a couple of days. Peter glances at Arnold, who is clearly trying not to cry as he looks down at his own egg, and then at Felipe, who has an expression to match Peter's thoughts. This has nothing to do with Arnold. Peter lowers his head, pokes at his egg. He's done defending himself. What good does it do? What good has it ever done? S.A., Felipe said Peter's first night, while both of them lay awake with growling stomachs, Peter biting back regret at ever having complained about the meals at the duplex. That's just the way things are. The jangle of keys makes everyone look up, a Pavlovian response. Except instead of food, the boys and Karen, who is sitting at the coffee table, playing Go Fish with Peter and Felipe and Arnold while Justin skulks in the ratty armchair in the corner, are greeted by the sight of Miss Charlize, emerging from her office for the first time today. They call Miss Charlize the headmistress, but Peter has yet to work out the logic behind the title. For one, this stuffy brick oven of a house is about as far from a school as it's possible to be. For another, and more importantly, Miss Charlize doesn't do anything, as far as he can tell, except stay in that so-called office, which doubles as her bedroom, shouting muffled curses into her telephone and emerging 3 times a day to check the locks on the doors, the windows, and, of course, the refrigerator. The only reason he can come up with is that Miss Charlize is the only staff member who stays on the premise at all times, and that she might possibly own the house, but this last is just a guess, because Miss Charlize does her best never to speak to them unless she absolutely has to. She's in full form this morning as she locks the office door behind her. She doesn't even glance at them as she shuffles past them on her way to the kitchen, keys clanging against her hip, where she keeps them looped through her belt. She also doesn't comment on the fact that Mr. Leonard is nowhere to be seen, even though technically there are supposed to be 2 providers with the boys at all times. He's outside, taking his 4th long smoke break of the morning. Arnold looks at Peter with a question in his eyes, but Peter just shakes his head. With Miss Charlize, it's better to accept the silence. But apparently, Karen does not agree. Just as Miss Charlize sidles past Justin, who doesn't even glance up from his book, she gets to her feet. "Ma'am," she says, and Miss Charlize turns around slowly, her poachy, red-rimmed eyes raking Karen's youthful face with unmistakable dislike. "Good morning. It's almost afternoon. I was wondering if I could speak with you for a moment. I have a very busy day coming up." Miss Charlize turns toward the door. "We have a new resident this morning, Miss Charlize," says Karen. Peter admires her gall. Miss Charlize's glare reminds him of Mrs. Arlington, makes his chest contract with phantom tightness every time she is in the room. But Karen holds her ground and doesn't falter, even when Miss Charlize barely glances at Arnold and then turns her obvious irritation on her employee. "If there's nothing else." Once again she turns away. "Actually," Karen steps forward, "I'd really like to talk to you about our meals budget. Maybe we could go into your office and—" "The budget is fixed," says Miss Charlize, not even bothering to turn around this time. "If you have a problem, take it up with the state." She takes another step toward the door. Peter's respect for Karen ratchets up another notch when the younger woman, undeterred, sidles around the coffee table to stand between the headmistress and the doorway, forcing Miss Charlize to look her in the eye. "Except, ma'am," she says, "except, I've looked at the budget, and I see what we have on site, and I just can't imagine." "That's outside your duties, Ms. Anders." "Well, yes, but it's public record and—" Miss Charlize's eyes jolt away from Karen's face to look at Ryan, who has just appeared in the doorway, a hulking shadow. Her scowl deepens. "And where have you been, Mr. Overton?" she snaps. "I thought your caseworker agreed that social time is to be a firm aspect of your rehabilitation." Ryan snarls in reply, making the three younger boys sitting around the coffee table recoil. Ms. Overton doesn't even blink, just pushes Karen out of the way and goes to stand toe-to-toe with her largest, most intimidating resident, even though her head only rises to his chest. "Do I need to write you up again, Mr. Overton?" she says. "Because if I recall, one more citation could indicate that your parole was granted prematurely. Should I inform your caseworker that you enjoy incarceration more than you enjoy following a simple rule?" "Miss Charlize, please." It was Ryan's turn on the computer. "I told him he could." Miss Charlize sticks a hand into Karen's face to silence her, still glaring up at Ryan. "Well," she says. Ryan's sneer deepens, and there is a collective holding of breath. For a second Peter is certain there is going to be a fight. He scoots closer to Arnold, blocking him from view. "Sorry, ma'am," Ryan grunts, and he takes a lumbering step to the side, out of Miss Charlize's way. Her keys clink as she shoulders past him. They all listen until she disappears down the hallway, and don't exhale until they hear the front door open and close, then the clunk of the key turning in the lock. Ryan stands in the hallway, gazing after her with an inscrutable expression until Karen steps forward and puts a hand on his arm. "Come on, Ryan, we can." Ryan jerks her hand off. Peter starts to rise, then scolds himself. "Keep your head down, Parker." "Back off, Beach," Ryan says, and before Karen can say anything to stop him, he disappears up the narrow stairs that lead to the bedrooms on the upper level. Karen stares after him, her back to the living room, and Peter can tell from the way her shoulders shake that she is gathering herself. But when she turns back, it's with a smile, which lingers on a struck-looking Arnold the longest. "I'm really sorry about that, boys," she says. Justin shrugs and goes back to his book. Peter can't think of anything to say, especially not when he can feel Arnold trembling slightly beside him. "The Miss K," says Felipe. "We all know you a homegirl. It isn't your fault this place is a shithole." Arnold looks even more shocked, but Peter and Karen give identical shaky laughs. "Language," she says, resuming her seat next to Arnold and placing a hand on his knee so subtly Peter wouldn't see it if he weren't looking for it. "I still work at the shithole, you know." "Yeah, and we live here. Ain't none of us can really talk sheet, but all I'm saying is you're allowed, Miss K. I can't speak for Pedro and Arnaldo, but I for one am no snitch." Seconded," says Peter, picking up his cards. "On the, not being a snitch part. Even felons have to have some morals, right?" They all laugh this time. It's the one thing that the halfway house has against the Arlingtons. At least here, Peter isn't alone. That the halfway house is like an oven is no exaggeration. There is no air conditioning. The windows are all locked shut. Peter has been here since June. He thought the heat couldn't be worse than it was in July, when the boys all had to wear sandals any time they were on the hardwood floors in the hallways, to avoid scalding their feet. Then August arrived. In August, the humidity makes the air so heavy breathing it is like having a continuous asthma attack. Their urine is fucking sludge, Felipe's words, no matter how much water they drink, because they are all sweating it out faster than they could hope to replenish it. If Peter stands up too quickly, he has to grip whatever wall or furniture is nearest to stave off the inevitable wave of lightheadedness. None of the boys complain. Even Arnold knows, by the end of his first week, there's nothing to be done. When Karen is on shift, she does what she can to mitigate the heat. She lets them into the yard, where the air is just slightly lighter than it is indoors, and they all take turns drenching each other with the garden hose and pilfering the little pockets of shade cast by the high, barbed wire fence and the houses next door. It's just enough to keep them from going insane. At night, though, there's no escape. The Friday after Arnold arrives, Peter is lying on top of his covers, unsure if he is half asleep or just torpid from heat and hunger and dehydration. On nights when he can't sleep, which is every night, he recounts the plots of the movies he and Ben used to watch over and over until the words turn into pictures and the pictures to dreams, and in this way he can usually claim a few hours of rest before the wasp sting of morning sun turns the sodden heat of night into something sharp. Tonight's tale is it came from outer space. After the Chitauri attack, his parents had forbidden Peter from watching it, but their reticence had only encouraged Ben. "If we can't watch cinematic masterpieces like this," said Ben, "then those alien BSTRDS have already won." It never failed to make younger Peter laugh. Tonight, older Peter watches in his mind's eye as the malformed, cycloptic alien lands. Just as it does, a shadow looms up over his bed. First, Peter thinks he's entered the hazy twilight that occurs before sleep, where dreams meld with reality. Then he realizes Ryan is standing over his bed, and he yelps. Ryan claps a hand over Peter's mouth, but not before his roommates hear. Arnold shoots up like a geyser and knocks his head on the bunk above his. Felipe scrambles out of the top bunk with a "What the F dash man" and grabs Ryan's arm. Peter fully expects Ryan to hit him. But as soon as Felipe touches him, Ryan releases Peter, hissing, "Shut the F up." The three younger boys freeze, staring up at Ryan, waiting. For a minute, he lapses back into his intimidating silence, considering each of them in turn. Then he reaches into his pocket. Felipe and Peter both start forward, but when Ryan's hand emerges, it is not holding a weapon but a silver key, which gleams in the moonlight. "What's that?" whispers Arnold. "It's a effing key, Damas." "Yeah, but what's it go do, pendejo?" says Felipe. His tone is irritable, but he looks just like Peter feels, curious. Ryan narrows his eyes. "Charlie's office." "No FNG way." Now Felipe can't keep the admiration out of his voice. Even Peter, whose heart is still thumping uncomfortably, leans forward to inspect the key, ignoring his own discomfort as he enters the perimeter of Ryan's reach. "How'd you get it?" he says, gee for his glasses. Ryan's scowl, apparently a permanent feature, gains clarity. "Grabbed it when the beach hip-checked me in the hall." "And she hasn't noticed it's gone?" "She keeps doubles of all of them. This is just the spare." In spite of himself, Peter starts to feel impressed too. Ryan's fingers must be far more nimble than their thickness would suggest. He wonders if that's why Ryan is in here. Felipe sits on the bed next to Peter, who has known his bunkmate long enough now to know when he is affecting casualness. Felipe's shoulders might be slumped, but his fingertips drum on the bedspread, sending vibrations up and down Peter's spine. "So what?" says Felipe. "You come here to shank us with it? Because I gotta say, my man, when they say size doesn't count, they're actually referring to." "Justin," says Ryan, "is a FING pages." "What? He didn't follow through when you dared him to kiss you?" Ryan does punch Felipe now, gives him a Charlie horse on the upper arm that's not enough to leave a bruise but is enough to make Felipe yelp. Peter gets to his feet, stands between Felipe and Ryan. "Get to the point then, sea monster," he says. "Not all of us are goons who don't need sleep." Peter is immediately surprised by his own audacity. In the swarm of adrenaline, the mouthiness he thought he'd lost the night Ben died rises up before he can stop it. He braces himself for a Charlie horse of his own, but Ryan doesn't hit him. "I need your help," he says. "What?" "Help, Dickless. Help." He shakes the key in Peter's face. "Justin said no, so I need one of you twerps. And I've heard Karen talk about you. She says you're smart." Peter glances sidelong at Felipe just in time to see him look at his lap. Peter knows Felipe has a crush on Karen, but Peter doesn't mention it, just swallows and looks back at Ryan. "What kind of help?" Charlie's lies about the food. Peter's boldness transmutes to queasiness in an instant. "I mean, probably, but..." "Not probably. She's got a second fridge in her office. I was in there 2 weeks ago getting written up and I saw it. She left it open and everything. It's full-sized, and it's FING loaded. She says we got no money in the budget, but she has enough food in that goddamn room of hers to feed the Upper East Side, and she's effing hoarding it." There is a moment of sharp silence. Even Arnold scoots closer now, his eyes shining with something Peter hasn't seen in them since he arrived. "Hope. Are you fucking serious?" says Felipe. Ryan nods. "I'm gonna get in," he says. "On Monday, when she does her errands. But I can't do it by myself. I need someone to distract the providers and keep lookout." He nods at Peter, pocketing the key. "So, you in?" For a second, All of Peter's mind is occupied by the thought of a full fridge. Soda, cookies, sandwiches, hell. At this point he would probably sell his own clothes for a fresh salad. He's grown so accustomed to the constant, gnawing hunger he almost can't remember what it's like to feel fully sated. And if Ms. Charlize really is dipping into their budget to buy food for herself, you're allowed to defend yourself, Peter. The image sloughs away. No, says Peter. Felipe and Arnold's faces go slack, while Ryan's immediately assumes an expression of fury. Pedro, what the hell, says Felipe. You can't be serious, man. But Peter sets his jaw, widens his stance, and meets Ryan's eye. If we get caught, we all get stuck here even longer, he says. Miss Charlize even said it, if Ryan gets written up again he gets a longer sentence. Maybe they even send us to actual jail. Peter, says Felipe, gaping. It's the first time he's used Peter's real name. It's food, essay. It's not like we're robbing the goddamn Queen of England. How can you not want food? You're the skinniest fucking kid here. Meeting Felipe's eye is harder than meeting Ryan's, but Peter forces himself to nonetheless. Trust me, he says, it's only going to make things worse. It always does. You stand up for yourself. Peter, lunging toward the gun right as Ben steps in front of him, pushes him back. Peter, hands thrown out to stop a descending blow, his lungs empty. Peter, handcuffed and alone, head hanging as his social worker appears to tell him he's no longer wanted. And things get worse. They always get worse. He looks at Ryan. I'm out. Ryan opens his mouth and Peter forces himself not to flinch, certain he's about to get his butt kicked. But before Ryan can respond, Felipe cuts in. I'll do it. Peter's stomach sinks, but when he turns to Felipe, his bunkmate's eyes are hard and unyielding, and looking not at Peter but at Ryan. The haters, Felipe says, just tell me what to do. On Saturday, after a night spent sleeplessly wondering what life at the halfway house will look like without Felipe, Peter corners him in the bathroom. Don't do it, he says. You were the one who told me what an idiot Ryan is. You know he's definitely gonna get caught. Don't go down with him, Felipe, you're better than that. Felipe spits his toothpaste out, rinses his mouth, and rounds on Peter with more coldness in his expression than Peter could have imagined from his bright-eyed, foul-mouthed friend. What the F would you know about how good I am, essay? What was once an endearment now sounds like a taunt. I knew you weren't a badass, Parker, but I never pegged you for a pages. And he shoulders past him. For the next 2 days, Peter rediscovers what it's like to be alone. He thought familiarity would have taken the sharp edge off, but it turns out the brief foray into camaraderie makes returning to solitude a dozen times more painful. Felipe's glares over the breakfast table and during social time make his stomach twist almost as badly as the persistent emptiness which Ryan is hoping to rectify with his plan. As for Ryan, he delivers the punch Peter was expecting the night before in the hallway Saturday afternoon, while the providers are distracted making dinner. Drives his fist into Peter's diaphragm, then grabs Peter by the collar before he can double over, forcing him to look up with streaming eyes. You tell anyone, he says, and you're effing dead. He drops him. Peter falls to his hands and knees, gagging as he tries to SCK in a breath while his lungs spasm. Ryan walks away. Who am I gonna tell? Peter groans when he gets his breath back. Just as he expected, no one replies. Monday arrives like its predecessors, swelteringly hot, and for Peter, with a nervousness that is almost as cloying as his sweat-soaked t-shirts. He spends the morning watching Felipe out of the corner of his eye, but Felipe is carefully expressionless, nearly silent while he eats the breakfast Karen prepares for them, half a cup of oatmeal, made with just boiled water, and reads in the ratty armchair while Peter and Arnold play cards during social time. Around 11, Miss Charlize emerges from her office. Crosses the living room without acknowledging any of them, keys clanging. Heads out the front door. A car door slams in the driveway, followed by a screech as the car pulls away. Peter sees Felipe glance at Ryan. He sees Ryan nod. Peter swallows and looks down at his cards. Peter was half hoping Arnold might say something to Karen, to whom he has latched like a barnacle. But he also knows Ryan and Felipe promised to let Arnold in on the goods if he kept his mouth shut. It seems like food is more important to Arnold than the pockets of affection he receives from Karen, because it is with a cheerful smile that the latter walks into the living room alongside Mr. Leonard around noon and announces, "Yard time, kiddos. It's way too hot in here." All 5 boys follow her into the backyard. Peter catches Felipe's eye as they crowd through the narrow hallway, trailing after the 2 providers. "Pleasey Mouse." Felipe looks away. They crowd into the tiny yard. Karen starts the hose, lets it run to get rid of the water that has been boiling in the coils all morning. When Mr. Leonard disappears around the corner in a trail of cigarette smoke, Ryan disappears too. Felipe waits until Arnold approaches Karen for his turn with the hose to make his exit, slipping through the back door into the house before Peter can think of anything to say to try and stop him. He thinks Justin notices too, but Justin just retreats to a corner of the yard and buries his face in the worn-out copy of Great Expectations he's been reading ever since Peter arrived. Peter feels sick. Please don't let them get caught, he thinks, watching the screen door. Please don't take Felipe away too. It occurs to him that Felipe might already be gone. At least as far as Peter is concerned. He looks at Karen, thinking maybe he should break his own rule, that he should snitch. Because even if they don't get caught, Miss Charlize is sure to notice if her food goes missing, isn't she? He can't catch Karen's eye. From the way Arnold keeps jabbering, keeping Karen's eyes on him, Peter thinks he is probably more in on this plan than he'd guessed. There is a crunch of gravel on the driveway. Peter's head whips around so fast the muscles in his neck twang. He knows, even without being able to see, that the car that just pulled up belongs to Miss Charlize. She's back. She must have forgotten something or. He looks to the back door, a string of unintelligible prayers tumbling through his head, but the back door doesn't open. Ryan and Felipe didn't hear the car. Peter hears the car door open, then shut. Around the front of the house, an atonal interlude of car keys knocking against one another. "Sheet," Peter whispers. "Sheet, sheet." He runs inside. Unlike Felipe and Ryan, Peter doesn't have time to be stealthy. He hears the screen door slam behind him, hears Karen call his name, but there's no time to stop and explain, because at the end of the main hallway he can see the front door, see the knob turning. As the door opens, Peter turns into the living area. At the opposite end of the room, the door to Miss Charlize's office is open, but there is no sign of Felipe or Ryan. Peter runs, whacking his shin against the coffee table hard enough his eyes water but ignoring the pain, stopping only when he's in the doorway. In a burst, he takes the office in, an unmade bed, a cluttered desk, framed pictures, lace on everything. And in the corner, Felipe and Ryan, crouched in front of a full-size fridge, yanking on the chain locked around its handle. "You didn't even think she might have another lock on here, did you, Pendejo?" Felipe is hissing, but he looks up when he hears Peter at the door, his mouth dropping open. "Pedro," he says, "what are you—" "She's coming," Peter pants. "She's—" A hand lands on his shoulder. Peter gasps, whirls around. Miss Charlize is standing right behind him. The thin layer of sweat that constantly covers Peter's body goes cold. Miss Charlize's expression is almost unreadable. The only change from her usual jowly stare is that her red-rimmed eyes are slightly narrowed. She digs her fingers into Peter's shoulder, reminding him so forcefully of Mrs. Arlington he has to remind himself to take a breath. He expects her to slap him. But Miss Charlize just pushes him behind her, into the living room, and takes a step into her office. Felipe remains slumped on the floor, mouth hanging slightly open, all the color gone from his face, but Ryan gets slowly to his feet, his expression hard. "Mr. Overton," says Miss Charlize, her voice as flat as it always is, "why am I not surprised?" Ryan spits at her feet. Finally, Felipe looks at Peter. His face is a reflection of the nausea Peter feels, the horror. Miss Charlize's expressionless is somehow worse than outright anger. It fills Peter with the same dread he felt waiting in the Arlington's basement the night he got arrested, knowing something terrible was coming but knowing what it was. Slowly, like a cat prowling after an injured bird, Miss Charlize steps over to her desk. Felipe, Ryan, and Peter follow her with their eyes, none of them moving. Miss Charlize picks up the phone, presses a number on the speed dial. There is a terrible deadly silence while she holds the receiver to her ear. "Yes," she says, "this is Charlize Benning at number 907. 3 of our boys have just attempted a theft in direct violation of their parole." Felipe leaps to his feet. "Miss Charlize, no please." Miss Charlize holds up a hand, and Felipe falls silent. "I'll need at least 3 officers and probably a van. I'll contact their parole officers directly." "Thank you." She drops the phone into the cradle. To Peter, it sounds like a gavel. "Miss Charlize," Felipe says, "please, I'm sorry. Please, I only got another month. Please don't do this, I can't go back." Peter has never seen his bunkmate cry. The sound of Felipe's voice cracking makes his own throat constrict painfully, but he doesn't know what to do. He's rooted to his spot on the sticky shag rug, his own mouth hanging open uselessly. In the distance, he hears sirens. Miss Charlize tilts her head and looks away from Felipe without acknowledging his tears, toward Ryan. "And how long did you have before your parole officer declared you fit to go home?" she says. 3 weeks, wasn't it? And yet here we are." She steps closer to him, and Peter has a wild urge to warn her off. Ryan is looking at her with an expression that reminds Peter of nothing so much as a coiled snake. He says nothing, though, and Miss Charlize goes on. "Tell me, Mr. Overton, was it worth it?" This is when Peter realizes Felipe and Ryan are at the halfway house because they are transitioning from juvenile detention centers. A theft like this will be a mark against them, could mean more jail time. But Peter isn't on parole. He's only here because he isn't wanted anywhere else. He steps forward. "Miss Charlize, it was my fault." Everybody looks around. Karen is standing in the entrance to the living room, shining with sweat but straight-backed, her expression set, determined. She is looking not at Peter but at Miss Charlize, who turns slowly away from Ryan to face her. Karen steps forward, puts a hand on Peter's shoulder. Unlike the other hands that have touched him there in the months since Ben died, hers is firm but gentle, and she only squeezes once, reassuringly, as she pushes him behind her. The sirens are getting closer. "What was that, Miss Anders?" says Miss Charlize. "I told them to do it," says Karen. "I told them about the fridge. I let them out of the yard. Don't punish them, Miss Charlize, it was my fault." "Miss K, you can't." "Be quiet, Felipe," says Karen sharply. "It's very noble of you to try and protect me, but this is on me, do you understand me?" Ryan is looking at Karen like he's never seen her before. Felipe is crying freely now but trying to rein himself in. Peter thinks he's probably the only one close enough to see that Karen is shaking. Miss Charlize narrows her eyes. "That's a very serious offense, Ms. Anders." "Yes, ma'am," says Karen. "But to be fair, I did try to talk to you about the food." For the first time, a flash of anger crosses Miss Charlize's face. "You realize you'll be fired for this." "No," say Felipe and Peter at the same time. Karen holds up a hand. "Of course, I'm taking full responsibility." There is a beat. UFNG Beach. Before any of them recognize what's happening, Ryan lunges at Miss Charlize. Karen screams. Peter and Felipe both cry out, but by the time Peter rushes forward, Ryan has Miss Charlize on the ground, his legs straddling her hips. Her arms fly up, trying to protect her face as Ryan rains down 1 punch, then 2. Peter shoves past Karen, who is screaming for Ryan to stop, and grabs Ryan by the arm as he raises it for another blow, but he only manages to slow him down. Ryan flings Peter away as though he's made of straw, and Peter falls back, his head jarring against the metal bed frame hard enough that his vision whites out for a second, his glasses falling off his nose. By the time his sight comes winking back, Felipe has wrapped himself around Ryan's neck, but he has as much success as Peter did. Ryan just shoves him aside, sending him sprawling beside the locked fridge. Ryan PPS his fist back again, and Miss Charlize, wild-eyed, throws her hands over her face in a last pitiful attempt at self-defense. But instead of the sound of a clenched fist on flesh, there is a crackle of electricity, followed by a choked-off scream as Ryan goes rigid and falls sideways off of his target. Everyone looks up. Mr. Leonard is standing over all of them, a taser clutched in one hand, a nearly spent cigarette still clenched between his teeth. Outside, the wailing sirens reach a crescendo. There is a sound of tires on gravel once more. The police are here. The police question everyone. But in the end they only take Ryan, though one officer stays behind to escort Karen off the premises. It's okay, she mouths at Peter and Felipe as they watch her go. And then she smiles. Peter tries to return it, but isn't sure he pulls it off. Beside him, Felipe is stone-faced, even though tears pour continuously down his cheeks as the door slams over her. In the dark, Peter watches Arnold's back until it stops quaking with silent tears and his breathing evens into the rhythm of sleep. It's well past midnight when this happens, so Peter assumes Felipe is asleep as well until his bunkmate drops quietly onto the ground beside him. Felipe sits at the end of Peter's bunk. Peter sits up. Felipe's face is swollen from crying, but there are no longer tears coming from his eyes, which regard Peter in the pale moonlight with a hardness Peter can't interpret. It's not the dislike Felipe has been radiating for the past 2 days, but it's nowhere near the companionability they used to share. When the silence has dragged beyond what Peter can stand, he says, "Felipe, I ever tell you why I'm here, Pedro?" Felipe's voice is soft too low to wake Arnold, but Peter still closes his mouth immediately. It's rhetorical, this question. Felipe knows he's never told. But Peter still shakes his head. The moonlight turns Felipe's eyes into shining pools of tepid white as he regards Peter. "My mom," he says, "is a really good mom. When we were little, she used to work 3 jobs. She could have worked 2 and we would have been okay, paying the rent and all that, but she took that 3rd job because she wanted us to have more than just a roof. She worked all the time, yeah, but whenever she wasn't working she was hanging out with us, me and my little sister, cooking for us, taking us to the movies, helping with homework. Just doing mom shit." "Felipe, I'm telling you," says Felipe, "because I want you to know that my mom is a good mom. She is. Just, not when Uncle Jose is around. Jose isn't my real uncle. That's just what he made us call him after he started dating my mom. Even when I was just some 12-year-old little kid, I knew this guy was an a-hole. He was always making my mom feel bad about herself and shit, like yelling at her for the dumbest stuff. Like, she would load the dishwasher away he didn't like and he'd chew her out for it. Just fucking scream at her. Who gives a that much of a shit about a dishwasher, Felipe pauses. His eyes flicker away just a bit, so he's looking into the distance rather than at Peter's face, and the moonlight drains out of them. "But my mom, she was lonely. She was raising 2 kids by herself, and when Jose wasn't screaming at her he'd bring her presents, make her feel special. So she kept him around. And Jose, he was a smart guy. He knew my mom would eventually catch wise, realize she could do better. So besides the gifts and stuff, he also got her into some bad shit. Drags. Stuff you try once and then can't say no to, 'cause you need it even while it's killing you. So then my mom had 2 drags. She had Jose and she had Smack. Felipe, I'm so..." "Simmer down, white boy. You got shit of your own, and I'm not looking for pity." Peter sits back. Felipe twists the sheets between his hands. "I told you I got a sister, right?" Peter nods. "Marina. She's 8 now, but back when Jose was first coming around she was only 6. But like a really smart fucking 6-year-old. Smart as you are, Pedro, doing math and reading and all that even though she was only in kindergarten. But when my mom started, when she stopped being such a good mom, Marina took it really hard. She stopped sleeping good, started skinning her thumb again even though she hadn't done that since she was 2, and she started wetting the bed." He glares at Peter, as though he expects him to say something cruel. But Peter just stares at him until he continues. "At first it wasn't a big deal. I just change her sheets, right? But after a few times of that happening we ran out of clean ones. At that point my mom had stopped doing laundry, and Jose sure as shit wasn't going to help. So we had to keep these PSS-stained sheets, 'cause it was too cold to just sleep without them, and I couldn't wash them by hand because our water kept getting turned off. This goes on for a little while. And one day Marina, she comes home crying. She tells me the other kids are making fun of her at school, calling her PSS head, and shit like that because of the smell. She says she doesn't want to go back. Now, I put up with a lot of shit, Pedro, But I wasn't gonna let a bunch of little punks make my smart-butt sister hate school. I wasn't gonna let them ruin that for her. So first I try to talk to my mom and Jose, but they're both passed out whatever. So I go into Jose's wallet. He doesn't got much, but he's got a few bucks, so I take them and I put them in my pocket and I grab my sister's fucking pee-stained princess sheets and I say, "Marina, stay here. I'll be right back." And I go to the laundromat. At first it's all fine. They got a change machine, so I get a bunch of quarters. But as I'm dropping them into the slot I realize I don't got any detergent. So I go to the front desk. They don't got any, they say, but I can try the convenience store across the street. I go over there, but the fucking detergent is $10, and I only got about 3 quarters. Peter is starting to feel sick, and not just because Miss Charlize sent them to bed without dinner. He holds his breath, forcing himself to keep looking at Felipe as Felipe twists the sheets in his hands harder, almost tearing. I stuffed it under my jacket, Pedro. It was so obvious, man. I can't believe they let me get as far as I did. But what do I know about stealing sheet? I just wanted to wash some fucking princess sheets. Now Felipe is crying again. It doesn't enter his voice, but fat tears drip down his nose, staining Peter's bedspread. State gave me a lawyer. She thought I'd get off easy because it was my first offense and I was pretty young, but the judge, this old white dude, he took one look at me and said, "You mark my word, son, you'll be back here in 2 weeks if I don't set you straight right now." And he gave me 3 months. He looks up. "You ever been to juvie, Pedro?" Peter shakes his head again. "Avoid it if you can." Felipe falls silent, stops crying. He stays silent for so long Peter thinks he's done, but just as he's about to ask, Felipe starts up again. "When I got home," he says, "Marina was gone. I guess my abuela figured out what was going on, came to get her while I was locked up. But she didn't have room for both of us, so I was stuck. It was bad enough when I had my sister, but when she was gone it was, he swallows, it was real bad. My mom and Jose had both gotten worse, and all they did was fight and take smack and pass out and then fight some more. I tried to stay away during the day, but I needed somewhere to sleep at night. And that's when they would really go at it." Felipe takes a deep, steadying breath, as though he has to steel himself for this next part more than what preceded, though Peter can't imagine that what comes next can possibly be more horrible than what's already been said. "One night I came home and they were sleeping on the couch unconscious. But this time, they'd left their stash on the coffee table. And I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought if my mom could get off the drags she'd go back to being the mom she used to be, or maybe that I could get Jose to leave if I set him off enough. So I took it and I left. I didn't have a plan, Pedro. I thought maybe I'd go to the river and throw it in. I don't know, I guess I really wasn't thinking at all, because what it came down to was me, this real Hispanic-looking kid with my hood pulled up, walking alone at night with a bag full of heroin. The cop who arrested me laughed right in my face when I told him it wasn't mine. And when I went to court the second time, it was the same judge. The same judge, and he just looks at me and he says, "How come you people never prove me wrong?" Huh. Peter is crying now. He knows he shouldn't be. It's not his place, and he wipes his face furiously with the back of his sleeve when Felipe frowns at him. "On Friday," he says, "you said, things always get worse when you stand up for yourself." "Felipe, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean you deserved any of this, I only thought." "Nah, Pedro. You got me wrong. I'm not trying to say you jinxed us or whatever. And I'm not saying you're wrong that things get shittier the harder you try. I'm saying things are shit no matter what you do. You don't get good things for acting good, and bad shit doesn't happen because you made the world angry. Bad shit just happens, and you can't help it, and I can't help it. That's just the way things are." "But Pedro..." "Yeah. I saw you about to take the fall for us before Miss K did down there. And I'm telling you, that was a dumb effing thing to do. You might get a sheet sandwich no matter what you put in the kitchen, but it's your choice whether or not you eat it. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the only way to not eat it is to look out for your fucking self. You jump in front of a bullet, man, and the only thing that happens is you get shot." Felipe stands abruptly. Before Peter can think of anything to say to stop him, he clambers up the ladder and disappears into the upper bunk. The broken support beam groans. Felipe doesn't look at Peter as they head down to breakfast the next morning. Peter doesn't try to catch his eye this time, just shuffles to his seat with his head down, his stomach twisting. To everyone's surprise, Miss Charlize is standing by the stove. Mr. Leonard is there too, even though he's not supposed to be on shift. He's got an unlit cigarette between his lips, and he grins as Arnold, Peter, and Felipe sit with Justin, who is already there. Peter feels a twinge of sympathy when Miss Charlize turns to look at them. She has a black eye, and her bottom lip is so swollen she looks like she's been stung by a massive insect. His sympathy doesn't last long. "It's come to my attention," says Miss Charlize, "that it may be time for me to take more of an interest in your rehabilitation. There's been a stunning lack of discipline in this house. A lack of structure. It ends today." She grabs 2 plates of scrambled eggs from the counter. She places the first one in front of Arnold, the second in front of Justin. And she walks out of the room. Now Peter and Felipe look at each other. They look at Arnold, who is staring between them with an expression like fear. They look at Justin, who is already eating his eggs, his head down. They look at Mr. Leonard, who continues to grin. And so Peter and Felipe learn what their punishment is going to be. There is no more yard time. No more card games. There is heat and sweat and taking long gulps of water from the tap in the bathroom, because Miss Charlize will only let them fill their water bottles 3 times a day. They have their phone privileges suspended. 2, which matters more to Felipe, because Peter doesn't have anyone to call anyway. There are no more meals. This Peter does care about. She gives them each a glass of milk and half an apple at bedtime, which is the only indication she doesn't intend to kill them with this punishment. It does nothing to stave off the twist in Peter's gut as he lays awake that night, listening to Felipe toss and turn above him and trying to remember what it was like when hunger was just something he complained about if his parents took too long with dinner, or if he went too long between meals because he was caught up in a project or reading. It feels as far away and fake as the sci-fi stories he tells himself to get to sleep. Tonight, the stories don't work. By the second day, Peter learns what hunger pains really means. The twist takes on a knife edge, making him feel like his stomach is full of blades. It's so bad he spends the day curled on the couch, only getting up when his need for water outweighs the pain, determinately avoiding looking at Miss Charlize. She wants them to beg. Peter isn't going to. Because stronger than the hunger, now, is the anger. He's angry at Miss Charlize for treating them like this. He's angry at Ben for leaving him here, for making him think life was ever supposed to be fair. He's angry for what's been done to Felipe, and angry because he desperately wants to find a way to prove him wrong, to prove that good things come to good people, and that you can fight back when things go bad, but he can't think of anything to make his argument. He won't beg though. That much he can still control. Lying awake on the second night. No more monster movies. Peter is only half conscious, and stories are too difficult for his hazy brain to formulate. Instead, he imagines the Avengers. It's just one scene, played over and over, but with different players each time. Captain America arrives in a hailstorm of splintered wood, gathers the kids, and leaves without a backward glance. Then it is Black Widow. Iron Man. Even the Hulk makes an appearance. Peter gets so lost in it, he doesn't notice that there are sounds coming from above him until the muffled whimpers turn into sobs. Peter gets up, sways, climbs the ladder to the upper bunk with more effort than he's ever spent on anything in his entire life. Felipe is curled up, arms wrapped around his stomach but still thrashing, rolling on the bed while he tries and fails to find a comfortable position. The sounds he's making remind Peter of the time he saw a dog get hit by a car. That time, Ben had yanked him away while other Samaritans rushed to help, covering Peter's ears and walking briskly until they were out of earshot. There's no one to yank him away this time. Peter grabs Felipe's hand. Felipe, it's okay. It's gonna be okay. It's not, Felipe, and she can't do this. She can't do this. She gotta feed us, man. She can't. The rest of the sentence is lost to another and Peter wants to prove Felipe wrong. But he doesn't know how. So instead he sits there, sweaty hands grasping Felipe's, knife twisting, and waits for exhaustion to outweigh hunger. Peter is sure she will give them breakfast the next day. If she really doesn't want to kill them, she has to, and she doesn't want to kill them. She can't. She'd never get away with it, right? But once again Miss Charlize has just 2 plates when they arrive in the kitchen. She gives them to Justin and Arnold and, just like the last 2 mornings, looks at Peter and Felipe as if daring them to challenge her before she walks out. Felipe gets to his feet, staggers over to the counter, where the cookware is soaking in the sink. "Get back to your seat," says Mr. Leonard, starting forward. "Off, I'm getting a drink." Felipe turns the sink on and ducks his head under it, manages just 1 gulp before Mr. Leonard grabs him by the shoulder and shoves him back. Felipe wipes his mouth on the back of his wrist, glares up at Mr. Leonard, and then stalks back to the table. Peter thinks he is probably the only one who sees Felipe slip something into his back pocket as he sits. But when he tries to get a closer look, Felipe turns away from him. Peter doesn't ask. He doesn't have the energy. Late afternoon. Peter is on the couch again, Felipe on the floor under the coffee table. In the corner, Arnold is curled in an armchair, while Justin, for all his staring at it, does not appear to have made any progress on his book. It's Wednesday. They haven't found a replacement for Karen yet, so there's just Mr. Leonard in the house, and around 4 he ducks out for a smoke break. The boys are so accustomed to his absence by now they don't so much as glance up as he leaves. After a minute, they hear the sound of the front door opening, the jangle of keys as Miss Charlize returns from her afternoon errands. Quietly, without expression, Felipe rolls out from under the table and gets to his feet. Peter raises his head just in time to see Felipe pull a knife out of his back pocket. In a great rush, hunger and exhaustion and hyperthermia are washed away by pure horror. Peter leaps to his feet. He immediately swoons, vision graying, but he shakes it away, forces himself to stay upright. He lunges, grabbing Felipe's arm before he can make it to the hallway and yanking him back. "Felipe, no!" he hisses. Felipe tries to fling Peter off, but Peter clings, grip made tight by desperation. "Get the F off of me, Peter." Behind them, Peter hears Arnold scurry into the corner near Miss Charlize's office. He shakes his head, frantic. "Please, Felipe, don't do it, please, you can't. They'll send you away forever, you can't." The jangle is getting closer. "You think it effing matters?" Felipe snarls. His eyes are sunken, red-rimmed, wild. "You think it matters where I go? I'm done for, Pedro. I was done for the second I stole that fucking soap. But she can't get away with this. She can't get away with it, you hear me? Let me go." But Peter doesn't. He grips harder and throws his weight back, trying to bring Felipe down. But he's too small, and Felipe is too determined. Instead of falling over, Felipe yanks his arm out of Peter's grip. The knife slices through Peter's palm as he goes down. He lands on his back, sees the blood, but doesn't feel the pain, not yet. Adrenaline pushes him back to his feet. Right as Felipe steps into the hallway, Peter tackles him. Both boys go sprawling into the hallway. The knife flies out of Felipe's hand, skitters across the hardwood, stops right at a pair of feet in ratty, ancient tennis shoes. Peter and Felipe's brief struggle ends as abruptly as it began when Miss Charlize picks up the knife. She clenches it, her knuckles white around the handle as she looks down at them. "So," she says. The boys scramble to their feet. Only when Peter sees that his hand is dripping blood all over the floor does the pain arrive. Felipe sees it too, but he can't say anything because he's breathing too hard. Peter shakes his head at Felipe, clenches his fist against the blood and his jaw against the pain, and forces himself to meet Miss Charlize's blackened, swollen eye. "What is it," says Miss Charlize, "that makes boys like you incapable of learning? What is the point of rehabilitation when you violent little imbeciles just continue to be violent little imbeciles no matter what we do? How come you people never prove me wrong?" Peter's vision goes red. How dare she speak to Felipe like that? How dare she, if she has even an inkling of what he's been through, of what she has put him through? The plan forms in an instant. Uncle Ben was wrong about Peter defending himself. But Felipe was wrong too. "It's my knife," he says. "Pedro!" Peter holds his bloody fist out, showing it to Miss Charlize, silencing Felipe. Peter can't defend himself. He can't help himself. That much is clear. But maybe, just maybe, he can help someone else. "It's my knife," he says again. Felipe was trying to take it off me. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Jumping in front of the bullet might get Peter shot, but if it saves Felipe, then that's exactly what he's going to do. The dry meatloaf and limp steamed vegetables they give him in the ER that evening are the best thing Peter has ever tasted. He eats them clumsily with his left hand, because his right, the cut held shut by 5 neat but gruesome black stitches, has swollen slightly, just enough to prevent him from holding a fork. He knows he should be scared. He's certainly on edge. Every time he hears footsteps outside the curtain that blocks the rest of the emergency room from view, he snaps his head up, expecting to see the cop who dropped him off here hours ago, back with HNDCFFS held aloft, ready to take him away for good. But Peter doesn't feel scared. He feels sick with worry for what Miss Charlize is doing to the boys at the halfway house, and guilty, because his stomach is finally full, and who knows if Felipe can say the same. But mostly he feels elated. He looks at his swollen hand, still stained reddish-brown with iodine, and he feels proud, for the first time and he can't remember how long. Felipe isn't going to jail, he thinks. In a few weeks they'll let him out. Maybe he'll get to see his sister. It's not much. It's so much less than he wants to do. But it's something. It's a chance Felipe might not have had otherwise. Peter did that. There are footsteps in the hall. Peter looks up, but when the curtain slides open, it is not a police officer standing in front of him but his social worker, her hair piled in a flyaway bun on top of her head and looking, as always, like she is millimeters away from bursting into tears. Behind her is a man. For a second Peter thinks he might be a police officer based solely on his build. He's more than 6 feet tall and almost too muscular, even though he's graying slightly and has small wrinkles around his eyes, denoting his advancing though not yet advanced age. But he's not dressed like a cop. He's wearing jeans and a polo shirt that's a little too small for him, so it's stretched across his broad chest. He smiles at Peter as he steps into Peter's curtained-off portion of the ER behind the social worker. Peter, surprised, smiles back automatically, then quickly drops it. "You," says the social worker, drawing Peter's attention, "are one lucky young man, Mr. Parker." Peter can think of nothing to say to this. By some miracle, she goes on, undeterred by Peter's silence, Charlize Benning has determined to deal with this fiasco internally. Apparently there are conflicting stories about what happened. She checks something on the clipboard she has every time Peter sees her. Felipe Serna insists that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, though he hasn't clarified what sort, and that any violence was incidental. She nods at Peter's cut. Ms. Benning disagrees strongly, but because you weren't being held at the house, at least not officially. The social worker sighs, flips her notes shut. The long and short of it, Mr. Parker, is that you aren't being placed under arrest tonight. Peter goggles at her. "I'm not going to jail," he says blankly. The social worker shrugs. "Like I said, you are one lucky young man. I wish I could say the same for me, seeing as I'm the one who has to figure out what to do with you now. Needless to say, Ms. Benning isn't keen on taking you back." Peter's mouth drops open. They can't possibly send him back to the halfway house. But it seems like luck is on my side as well, for once. One of our longest-standing foster parents has just seen his most recent project off to college, and so he has an opening. He's very kindly agreed to take you. Peter bristles at the word project. It reminds him of Felipe's judge, calling him "you people." But when he looks at the tall man, he is frowning slightly at the social worker, as if he too takes offense at the word. "Stephen has a lot of experience with problem cases," says the social worker. "I think he'll know exactly what to do with you. In fact, I'm counting on it. Because I feel I should warn you, Mr. Parker, that this is absolutely your last chance. I don't have anywhere else to put you, and if we have another incident, assuming you once again dodge jail time, you'll likely have to leave the city. Perhaps even the state. So try, for the love of God, to rein yourself in. Life isn't fair to any of us. That doesn't mean we get to go around taking it out on the people who try to help. Do you understand me?" Peter feels another flare of indignation. "You think it FNG matters?" But he swallows it down. The thought of leaving New York is worse than the possibility of jail. He might not have a home anymore, but all of the ones he has had were here. His parents passed on their love of this city to Peter. So did Ben. You are allowed to defend yourself. In his head, Uncle Ben's voice has faded. It no longer sounds like his uncle's voice at all. Just an impression of an impression. And soon it will be gone. Peter nods. The social worker returns this with a clipped nod of her own, and steps aside to give the man room to step forward. "Meet your new foster father," she says. The man smiles again as he extends his left hand for Peter to shake. Peter takes it, and the man's big hand swallows his entirely. But Peter does his best to match his firm grip. "Hi, Peter," he says. "It's nice to meet you. I'm Stephen Westcott. But most people just call me Skip." Peter tries very hard to feel something about Skip Westcott as he follows him out of the R and to a waiting car-sensible sedan, a few years old but meticulously clean. But as soon as the social worker told him he wasn't going to jail, the coursing adrenaline that has been keeping him upright was flushed away by a wave of exhaustion. His hand is throbbing now. They didn't give him any painkillers. He saw the nurse mark high risk somewhere on his chart when she thought he wasn't watching, so he assumes that has something to do with it, and even with the addition of meatloaf, his stomach is still growling. He takes his place in the front seat while Skip throws his duffel bag into the trunk and then concentrates all of his energy on not letting his eyes slip closed. But beyond this faint sense that he should remain alert, Peter has nothing. Skip could be a lump of human-shaped putty for all that Peter knows or cares about him. The social worker might have called Skip his foster father, but Peter knows better. Parents, families, these are things of the past. There are only places to stay now. And when he can people to help. Skip gets into the car beside him, starts it, and pulls out of the parking lot. It's late at night, but Peter recognizes this only when he sees how empty the streets are. He realizes he is being rude. That he's probably acting exactly like someone would expect a juvenile delinquent who just got kicked out of a home for fighting to act. Surly. Withdrawn. He clenches his hand shut, uses the pain to pull his focus. He says. "Mr. Westcott?" "Skip," says Skip. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I didn't try to, shank anybody. Just in case you were wondering." Skip doesn't respond for a second. Long enough that Peter's insides start to squirm more violently, and not just with hunger now. Suddenly he does feel something, and that something is a low sense of foreboding. He remembers what Felipe said about things being shitty no matter what you do, and he wonders, for the first time, where Skip is taking him. It can't be worse than the halfway house. Can it? But when Skip does answer, Peter is surprised once again. "I believe you," Skip says. You do." Skip nods. "Even though? I mean, there was a knife. I don't want to lie about it, there was. And it was mine. It was definitely mine. I don't want you to think I'm dangerous or something. And I'm not lying, Now Skip smiles softly, taking his eyes off the road for just a second to raise his eyebrow at Peter. "Peter," he says, "didn't I just say I believed you?" Peter closes his mouth. Frowns. Skip chuckles and returns his attention to the road. "You hungry?" Peter wants to say that he is starving. Maybe literally. But as soon as he thinks it, his mouth feels like it is filled with glue. He can't form the words. Out of this bitter stickiness and into his head, a voice rises. "He's testing you," it says. Like a whisper, but loud nonetheless. "He's looking for your weaknesses. Don't give them to him." It's not Uncle Ben's voice. It's not Felipe's. It does not, in fact, belong to anyone Peter knows. He has a vision of a ghoul sitting on his shoulder and immediately wants to shake himself. Instead he closes his mouth and obeys it. Peter shrugs. "I don't want to establish a bad precedent," says Skip, "but just about the only thing open at this time of night is McDonald's. You have any objection to highly processed, ethically questionable meat?" The last fast food Peter ate was that pizza, sitting on the curb, telling Ned about the Arlingtons and feeling sorry for himself in a way he can hardly believe just 3 months later. Tonight, a cheeseburger sounds like something he believed in when he was a kid but now knows to be false, like the Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus. And yet the next thing he knows, there is one sitting in his lap. It is in a grease-stained paper bag. In that bag there is also a sleeve of French fries the size of Peter's head, and in the cup holder beside him there is a large Coke, dripping with condensation. Watching Skip out of the corner of his eye, Peter takes a fry out of the bag and bites into it. It is greasy and salty and so hot it almost burns Peter's mouth, and as soon as it touches his tongue a fat tear rolls out of the corner of Peter's eye. He turns his head sharply, pretends to look out the window. He's sure Skip sees, because the tears won't stop once they've started, though at least they are silent. But Skip says nothing. He just drives. "We'll have to be quiet going in," says Skip. "I have 2 others at the moment. Twin girls. They're 7. I didn't have a chance to tell them you'd be coming, but they should be asleep anyway, so." Peter nods and Skip unlocks the door. Full, really, truly full, for the first time in months of fries and pop and cheeseburger, Peter is starting to feel floaty and distant, and even though he hears the word Skip is saying they are getting stuck in whatever part of his brain translates them into meaning. It's like being in a dream. He just accepts whatever's put in front of him without question. The dreamlike sensation intensifies when he sees the apartment. It's huge, at least twice as large as the one he lived in with Ben, and 10 times as neat. The entrance opens onto an open-concept living area, with a kitchen as large as the whole upper floor of the halfway house to Peter's left, a cozy living room to his right. In this living room is a girl, sitting on the sofa and watching the flat-screen TV on silent. She gets to her feet as Skip locks the door behind them and smiles at Peter. She's a few years older than him and very pretty. Peter immediately blushes, surprising himself for the dozenth time since the only girl he's been around all summer is Karen, and he never thought of Karen as a girl more like an older sister. He didn't even know he could think of girls like that anymore. "Hey B," says Skip. "Can you stick around a minute? I'm gonna show Peter his room." The girl who must be the babysitter nods. "Welcome home, Peter," she says. Peter allows Skip to steer him down a hallway, now certain this is a dream, and bracing himself for how awful it will be when he wakes up. But he doesn't wake up. Instead, Skip leads him to a bedroom that is small compared to the rest of the apartment but still larger than any Peter has ever slept in. Larger than Uncle Ben's room was at the old apartment. It is mostly bare, but there is a desk with a lamp in one corner and a full-size bed under the window, neatly made with fresh sheets. While Peter is wondering at this beautiful mirage, Skip sets his duffel bag on the bed, goes to one of 2 more doors in the room and opens it, revealing a small attached bathroom. Just some basic toiletries, toothbrush, soap. But the towel is clean at least, if you want to take a shower. I usually do my little spiel right about now, but I'll be honest, Peter, you look dead on your feet. "Wanna save it for the morning?" Peter nods dumbly. His fingers feel numb. "Alrighty. Anything else you need?" Peter shakes his head. "Well, my room is next to yours, if you think of something." "Night, Peter." He turns to leave. "Wait." Skip turns back. Peter feels tiny, standing in the middle of this huge room in this huge apartment, wearing his blood-stained clothes and his crooked glasses, and smelling like sweat and hamburger grease. He's never felt more out of place in his entire life. "Do you know who I am?" he says. Skip frowns. "Only what they gave me in your file." "Why?" Because I'm Peter. Peter Parker. This doesn't I don't Why are you being so nice to me?" Skip smiles as Peter's words fail him. His eyes sweep over Peter, just once, but in that up-down glance Peter has the feeling Skip is taking in more than his appearance, and his feeling of unbelonging increases tenfold. "Get some sleep, infamous Peter Parker," he says. "We can talk more in the morning." He nods and walks out, closing the door behind him. "What the hell?" says the infamous Peter Parker into the darkness. "What the hell indeed?" says the ghoul on his shoulder. In the dark, Peter shivers. But he is too tired, then, to figure out why. Peter wakes with no memory of having gotten into bed and no notion, for a second, of what has woken him. Then he opens his eyes and finds that he is staring into someone else's, round and blue and mere inches away from his own. Says Peter. The pair of eyes drops out of sight as Peter scrambles to sit up and reaches for his glasses. By the time he has them perched on his nose, he has registered that it is daytime, judging from the light filtering in between the curtains. For a moment he thinks he must have imagined the eyes, because a quick sweep of his room tells him it is empty, the door closed. But when he hears a giggle coming from under his bed, the pieces click into place. Peter takes a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to get oriented. He is not in the halfway house. He is not at the Arlingtons either. He is in an air-conditioned apartment, lying in a big bed, and the person who woke him is not some ham-fisted 16-year-old here to punch his guts out for being a snitch, but rather hopefully one of the 7-year-old girls Skip spoke of last night. Peter lets the breath out. "Oh no," he says. "I think there might be a monster under my bed." The giggles are suddenly and badly stifled. "What am I gonna do?" Peter says, feigning fear. "I have to get out of bed somehow, but I can't put my feet on the floor. They might get eaten." Peter hears the sound of tiny teeth gnashing beneath him. "All right, Parker," he says seriously. "Get it together. You don't even know what monster you're dealing with yet, and you don't want to be the kind of guy who stereotypes mythical beasts. He might be a pacifist for all you know. Or a vegetarian." "Not," says a muffled voice. "No," Peter corrects himself, pretending he didn't hear. "Probably not a vegetarian. But possibly a really nice guy. Or girl. Guess the only way to find out is to look." At the look, he leans over his bed and sticks his head underneath. There is a shriek, and then a little girl in blonde pigtails comes estinging out into the open. She is wearing Iron Man pajamas and a sparkling purple tutu, and she screams as Peter jumps out of bed and chases her into a corner. "I knew it," he says, descending on her with wriggling fingers. "It's a tickle monster." For just a second they are both caught up in the mirth of the moment, both laughing. "Lily!" The mirth drains away. Peter straightens and turns around to find Skip standing in his bedroom doorway, eyes wide, staring down at the scene in front of him, a scene which includes a reddening Peter, who is already scolding himself for thinking, even for a second, that just because the scenery changed the danger might have passed. Have the last 5 months taught him nothing? "Sorry," he says, backing toward the bed. "Sorry, I wasn't." Skip's eyes are not on Peter. They are on the little girl, Lily. But when Peter turns to her, she doesn't look frightened. She pushes herself to her feet, panting, and runs toward Skip. "Daddy, the new boy is a tickle monster. And he's a vegetarian." Peter braces himself as Skip looks at him. And then, amazingly, Skip's expression softens. "I know for a fact that he is not a vegetarian," he says to Lily, "and it looks to me like you're the monster in this scenario. Didn't I tell you to let him sleep?" "Sorry," says Lily, clearly not sorry at all. "But Daddy." "No buts. Go wake your sister up and get dressed. B is going to take you to school this morning." "Is the tickle monster coming?" "Nope. The tickle monster and I are going to have a talk." Lily continues to sing okay as she flounces off, out of the room and down the hallway. Peter shuffles his feet while Skip stares at him. Skip's expressionless face makes Peter certain he has done something wrong, and he thinks with a pitiful surge of self-loathing that at least at the halfway house he knew what to expect when he was in trouble. The edge of anxiety, waiting for Skip to reveal how his anger will present, is razor-sharp, the anticipation almost worse than whatever is waiting on the other end of this long silence. "You're good with kids," says Skip. Peter's shoulders snap up automatically, his body on the defensive before the words can sink in. When they do, his mouth falls open. "I'm what?" "You're good with kids," Skip repeats. "My last foster kid didn't know what to do with the girls. You'd thought they were a couple of vipers for all he wanted to do with them. But you're a natural, huh?" "Yeah, I guess. I mean, I like kids. And there were younger kids at the halfway house, sometimes." Skip looks Peter up and down again. Again, Peter feels that inexplicable shiver, but this time it is mostly lost under the unexpected flush of pride. Peter used to thrive off of the praise of adults. It was one of the reasons he was such a target for bullies in elementary school. But it's been so long since he's experienced it that having that now feels like uncovering a fossil of his old life, familiar and a little foreign all at once. "Come on," says Skip. He leads Peter into the kitchen, where Peter is greeted by another familiar but unfamiliar sight. Breakfast is waiting on the kitchen table. There are scrambled eggs and waffles and bacon and fresh fruit, a carafe of orange juice, a pitcher of coffee. He almost doesn't understand what it's all doing there until Skip offers him a seat and places a plate in front of him, piled high with a little bit of everything. Peter stares at it. "Eat," says Skip lightly. And Peter is incredibly grateful for the instruction, because for some unfathomable reason, his first instinct was not to eat. For just a second, upon seeing the stack of waffles dripping with syrup, the fluffy eggs, the fat red strawberries, the new voice in his head screamed at him to take it and run. Peter takes a shaky breath, picks up his knife and fork, and smiles while Skip takes the seat beside him and pours 2 cups of coffee. "Again, I'm setting a bad precedent," he says, setting one in front of Peter, "but you look like you could use it. You're old enough to drink coffee, right?" Peter has never tasted coffee in his life. But he nods, and Skip looks pleased when he takes the mug, just like he did when he praised Peter for being good with Lily. Coffee is awful, Peter discovers. But he works very hard to turn his grimace into a smile as he takes a sip, because Skip is still watching him. "I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself," he says. "Okay." Peter sets down his fork. "Save some for later, Parker. You don't know when you'll get it again." "No, keep eating. I want you to feel at home here, Peter. Do you understand?" Peter picks the fork back up, trying to hide the little tremble in his hands as he does. "What the hell was that?" Skip doesn't notice. "The first thing I think you should know," says Skip, "is that I've been a foster parent for almost 10 years now. You've probably already noticed that I'm an unusual candidate, right? Single men aren't usually social workers' first choice for placements. But what I do is very specialized. I work specifically with kids who have had a really rough go of things, kids that have been in trouble or who have very specific needs, things that make them difficult to place otherwise. And whenever I get a new child or young man, like yourself, I like to explain to them why. When I was a younger man, Peter, I had very different priorities. I was married, and I had 2 children, a son and a daughter, but my real love was my work. I was in finance, and it was very competitive and fast-paced, and I was very good at it. My main goal, the only thing that was important to me, was making more money, because that was what made me feel important. It probably goes without saying, but my family suffered very much because of this. My obsession eventually led my wife to leave me, but even that wasn't enough of a wake-up call. I dismissed her as ungrateful, and I continued as I always had, ignorant to the pain I was causing others, so long as I got ahead. The real wake-up call came when my son killed himself. This time Peter sets his fork down out of shock. Skip says it bluntly, but there is a faraway look in his eyes as he does, something Peter can only recall seeing on an adult's face once in his life, on Uncle Ben's, the night his parents died. "It was a long time ago," says Skip, catching Peter's look, "but there are some things you just don't get past." And what I found unbearable was the fact that if I had just been looking closely, I could have stopped it. He sighs. "My son, he had a lot of problems. When he was about your age, he started getting into trouble at school, causing fights, skipping class. Eventually he got kicked out, and it was around that time that he started drinking, taking drags, running with all of the wrong crowds. He was in trouble with the law more often than I could keep track, but because I was so self-absorbed, I dismissed all of it as stupid teenage rebellion. I was angry with him, in fact. I thought he was doing it to spite me, and I resented that his behavior was taking time away from my job. When he died, it was like waking up from a terrible dream. I realized that I had been the stupid one, that everything my son had done was the result of a horrible, unspeakable pain, and if I had even once opened myself up to what he was trying to communicate." Skip swallows dryly. There are tears in his eyes, but he blinks them away, and looks at Peter directly. "The day of my son's funeral, I quit my job. I had more than enough to retire, but I knew I couldn't spend my days sitting on some beach, letting all of the money I had earned while neglecting my family go to waste. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make sure that what happened to my son never happened to another young man. I understood, finally, that the world was not separated into good and bad people, winners and losers, but rather into people who had been given chances and people who had not. My son didn't get his chance. But I swore I would make sure that other boys like him would get theirs any time I could help. To date, I've fostered 6 young men, all of whom were on the brink of jail or worse when I took them in. I've seen every last one of them off to college. I hope one day to say the same for you." Skip reaches across the table. He takes Peter's hand. If it's been an age since an adult praised him, it's been even longer since one touched him in a way that was not hitting or shoving or simply moving him out of the way. Even Karen was not allowed to touch the boys except to restrain them, and then only in emergencies. When Skip's big hand closes over Peter's, he thinks immediately of Uncle Ben, of how casually he would offer a hug or ruffle Peter's hair, or pull him into his side while they were watching TV, and he has to blink away tears of his own. Weirdly though, he also has to suppress a little shudder. Maybe it's been so long he doesn't know how to react anymore, but as soon as Skip's hand squeezes, Peter doesn't know if he wants him to hold on forever or let go immediately. Before he can decide, Skip goes on. "I read your file, Peter," says Skip. "You've made some bad decisions. And I want to warn you now that I don't accept that behavior in my home. I will work with you, I will listen to you, but my priority is safety, and that goes doubly in the last few years because I have the girls now. If I ever think their happiness or their well-being is compromised by your presence here, then you and I will say our goodbyes. Do you understand?" Peter nods. "But just because you've made bad choices doesn't make you a bad person. I believe that with all my heart. And if you're willing to work with me, I think you and I can make some really great things happen. Do you agree?" Peter feels tingly. The dreamy sensation of last night is back, but underneath there is a tiny light, a flame of something Peter thought he had lost the moment that Mugger pulled the gun on Uncle Ben, so small and so foreign that it takes a second for Peter to recognize it as hope. "Okay," he says. Skip smiles and releases Peter's hand. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a Stark phone, and hands it to Peter. "That's a privilege," he says. "If I think you're misusing it in any way, I will take it back. But so long as you're responsible, I like you to have a way to communicate with me, all right?" "Mr. Westcott, Skip, I really don't know what to I mean, yes, of course. Thank you, sir. Thank you." Skip laughs and gets to his feet. "It's a deal then. Now, why don't you go back to bed? I have to get you set up at school, but that can wait until tomorrow, I think. And I need to make sure the girls aren't drenched in slime or something, and if that sounds like a weirdly specific fear, well, you'd be amazed what 7-year-olds can get up to." He claps Peter on the shoulder. "Welcome home, son," he says. "I really am glad to have you here." He disappears down the hallway. Dazed, Peter finishes his waffle quickly and then stumbles back to his bedroom, trying to make sense of what has just happened. 24 hours ago he was sitting at a tiny kitchen table in a house full of people who despised him, drenched in sweat and quaking with hunger, watching as Felipe stole a knife out of the kitchen sink. Now he is so full he is almost uncomfortable, heading to a room he doesn't share with anyone, clutching a cell phone that belongs just to him. "You're letting your guard down, Parker? Why that shiver earlier? Why did Skip's hand on your hand make you want to run? Bad shit just happens, Pedro. You gotta look out for yourself. What if I don't have to?" The last thought is the one that scares him the most. So Peter shakes the voices away. He enters his room, closes the door, and unlocks the phone with his clumsy, swollen hand. The Gmail app is already installed. Peter opens it. "Ned," he types, slowly, "you'll never believe where I am." After he emails Ned, Peter falls asleep again. It's a long sleep, but restless, and when Peter blinks back to consciousness sometime in the late afternoon, it takes him a second to orient himself. He stares at the ceiling for a full 30 seconds, expecting the white paint to turn into the broken slat of Felipe's bunk at any moment. But the white remains. So the next thing Peter does is check his phone. He expects to see a reply from Ned. He does not expect to see 17 replies, the first of which is "Oh my God," several of which are just completely incoherent, and the last of which says, "I am outside." Outside? Peter stares at the word for a long time, wondering if it's some sort of typo. Outside of what? This is when he realizes there are voices coming from the living room. Peter looks up. The bedroom door is half open, allowing the voices to drift through. One of them, though muffled, he recognizes as Skip's. And the other? Peter practically trips over himself in his haste to get out of bed. In the living room, two figures are sitting on the couch, facing away from the hallway. Even sitting down, Skip towers over the second figure, which has black hair and round shoulders and is bouncing slightly as it says something to Skip that Peter can't quite hear. Ned. Ned and Skip turn to face him. Peter feels a surge of happiness, elation, disbelief. That's Ned, his Ned, sitting in the living room of the apartment Peter now calls home when just hours ago Peter was certain he would never see him again. Peter starts forward as Ned leaps to his feet, then freezes. Just as suddenly as the happiness rose, it sloughs away in a cold front of dread, so powerful it takes Peter a disorienting moment to understand it, and even then he's not sure he does understand. Isn't he supposed to be happy to see his best friend? But he's not. The only word for what he's feeling is terrified. Peter is a curse, a taboo, and while he can accept that for himself, can even live with it, especially when he can use it to help the people around him, he never wants Ned to get caught up in the terrible whirlwind of bad fortune that is his life. Ned, catching Peter's expression, halts midway across the distance between them. "What are you doing here?" says Peter. Ned's face falls. Peter has never seen anyone look so disappointed, but he can't move, can't summon anything other than an almost irrepressible desire to make Ned leave. It's irrational, inexplicable. Skip has been nothing but nice to him since he arrived. But the animal part of Peter is screaming at him to get Ned out, get him away, the same way it screamed at him to take the food and run this morning. Skip gets to his feet slowly. "It's okay, Peter," he says. "Ned and I were just getting acquainted." Swallowing, Peter turns to Skip. "I didn't give him your address," he says. "I don't even know your address." "I found it myself," says Ned. "I basically just Googled all the Westcotts in Midtown. It wasn't even hard." "Peter, I thought." "It's not Ned's fault," says Peter. I was telling him I had a new place to stay. I didn't think he would actually show up. I know I'm not supposed to. Please don't blame him. It's my bad." Whoa, says Skip, holding up his hands, frowning. "Peter, you're not in trouble. You're allowed to have friends over." The worry doesn't disappear, but it does go stagnant. "I am." Skip laughs. "It's a little awkward but not unkind. Yeah. I told you this morning, I want you to feel at home here. Granted, I'd normally appreciate some warning." He glances at Ned, and once again something foreign and absurd flares in the back of Peter's mind. The instinct to jump in front of his friend, but Ned here seems like an okay cookie. And I can understand why he's eager. It sounds like you two haven't seen each other in a while. Peter swallows and nods. "Come sit down," Skip says. "Ned was just about to tell me some exciting news." Dumbly, Peter follows Ned back to the couch. Sits beside him and can hardly believe he's real, even when their sides are pressed together. While Skip takes the armchair across from them, Ned mouths, "Holy shit, dude," and gestures at the apartment, wide-eyed. "I know," Peter mouths back. Skip waits until he has their attention to speak. "So," he says, "Ned was just telling me you used to go to Midtown." "That's very impressive, Peter." "It's not in the file they gave me." Peter gulps, shrugs. The edge hasn't quite faded. He still feels tense, like he's waiting for a blow to fall. But Skip is still smiling, so he says, "Yeah. I only did 7th grade though, before I moved." "Peter was the smartest kid there," says Ned. "He had a scholarship and everything." "Ned, you don't have to." "And I know he missed 8th grade, Ned plows on. "But the new semester just started a week ago and I talked to Principal Morita today and he said that if Peter can still test into all the grade level classes he'd be willing to consider letting him do late registration because of the circumstances and whatever, and Peter can definitely test into all the classes because, like I said, he was the smartest kid in school. And no offense, Mr. Westcott, but I think it would be super uncool of you if you didn't at least, consider it. Because really, is there anything worse than, unrecognized potential? And I know it's kind of expensive, but I can get Peter a transit pass and if he signs up for the same classes as me we can share books, and—" "Ned, it's okay, I don't, Mr. Westcott, school is really expensive and—" "But school is important," says Ned pointedly, in a way that makes Peter think he rehearsed this argument many times on his way over. "It's an investment in our futures. In Peter's future. And I just really think you should consider it, Mr. Westcott, because no matter what they said about Peter in his file or whatever, he's the best person I've ever known. He deserves this." Ned goes red as he says it, and his hands are clenched on his knees like he is desperately holding on to every ounce of courage available, but he doesn't break eye contact with Mr. Westcott, and when he finishes speaking he clenches his jaw and continues to hold it. Peter, though, has to look away. His eyes are prickling. Skip looks between the pair of them, still smiling mildly. Well, Ned, you've certainly convinced me. Both boys let out identical breaths. Peter hadn't even realized he was holding his. I have, says Ned. Yes, though to be fair, I'm probably not the holdout you were expecting, says Skip. Education is the main focus in all of the work I do with my boys. I had planned to look into schools for you today as it was, Peter. I had no idea you were so gifted, or Midtown would have been top of the list anyway. But it's still lucky you're here, Ned, because I have a feeling Peter isn't one to toot his own horn about these things. Skip winks at Peter, whose mouth is hanging open. To Ned he says, give me Principal Morita's number. I'll call him first thing in the morning. Now, do you boys want something to eat while you catch up? I have pizza rolls. Ned immediately springs into action, fumbling in a backpack at his feet that Peter hadn't noticed until now and jumping to his feet to give Skip the little slip of paper he pulls out of it. Peter, on the other hand, is too stunned to move. He can't remember the last time anything was this easy. Even when he was living with Uncle Ben, good things didn't just happen, at least not without some sort of emotional or financial tug-of-war. School, in particular, had always been a source of tension. Even though Ben never, ever complained, Peter knew his tuition had been a burden, even with his scholarship. Knew Ben had taken extra shifts and spent long nights poring over receipts, trying to make up for the deficit. But Skip didn't even blink. What could that mean, Peter? Because you know it's not you. Good things don't happen to Peter Parker, so think, stupid. What does it mean? Do you want to show Ned your room? Peter jolts and gets to his feet. Yeah, sorry. Actually, says Ned, I have to go. I'm my mom, but thank you for, having me and... Anytime, Ned. A friend of Peter's is a friend of mine. Why don't you walk your friend out, Pete? Numbly, Peter gets to his feet and follows Skip to the front door, Ned trailing in his wake. Skip waves them out, silently pressing a key into Peter's palm as he passes and winking again. He closes the door after them. Ned and Peter are silent as they walk down the hall and into the elevator. But as soon as the doors close over them, Ned tackles him. Oh my God, he says. Oh my God, you're alive, dude. You're alive and you have all your limbs and you don't have a bunch of prison tattoos on your face and you're here. I can't believe it. This is the best day of my life. At last, a smile works its way onto Peter's face as he staggers under the weight of his friend's hug and reaches up awkwardly with his uninjured hand to return it. Wow, you must have a pretty low bar, Ned. I'm actually a little insulted. What about Comic-Con 2013? Did I get you those tickets for nothing? Ned disentangles himself and punches Peter lightly on the arm. Oh my God, you're not seriously being a smartass right now, Parker. Peter continues to grin until Ned steps back, and Peter sees there are tears in his eyes. Ned wipes them quickly, but not quickly enough. Peter's grin fades. Oh man, Ned, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. I'm okay, man. Look, I'm right here. I can't believe it happened twice, dude. You just freaking disappeared. Again. The elevator dings. The boys step absently into the reception area, and Peter only vaguely recognizes that there is a front desk and a doorman, meaning Skip must have even more money than he originally guessed, while Ned leads him across the entranceway and onto the sidewalk just outside. I'm sorry, says Peter. I wanted to call you, Ned. I wanted to call you so bad, but I couldn't. Were you really in prison? What? Of course I wasn't. Who said I was in prison? Flash, mostly. But it was like the rumor of the century last semester. Everyone said you went nuts and tried to kill your foster family. It was insane, dude, but I couldn't get a hold of you and the teachers wouldn't say anything about what actually did happen, so. Peter groans and puts his face in his hands, then removes them immediately when his injured palm gives a painful throb. Whoa, Peter, what happened to your hand? Peter shakes his head. It's nothing. It's complicated. I'll tell you, Ned, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you got me back into school. How did you do it so fast? Ned wipes his eyes on the back of his wrist again, but the tears aren't coming as freely anymore. He sniffs. More like how could I be so slow? I went straight to Morita as soon as you emailed this morning. I skipped first PRD. I would have skipped the rest of the day, but then they would have called my mom and, well, you know. Speaking of, Ned looks at his watch, then over his shoulder at the beginnings of the rush hour traffic in the street beyond. He gives Peter a strained look. It's fine, says Peter. You've already I don't even know how to thank you. Ned reaches into the front pocket of his jeans and pulls out a flip phone. It's tiny and so outmoded Peter almost doesn't recognize it as a phone until Ned presses it into his hands. You can thank me, he says, by using that. Thanks Ned, but Skip actually got me a phone. A freaking Stark phone and… Okay, that is insanely cool and we will be talking about all of this as soon as I get home, but right now just shut up for a second. That's a burner phone. Peter raises an eyebrow. This is very cute of you, Ned. Yes, it is, and also don't make fun of me because you know this is a good idea. I got it at the bodega at lunch. I only prepaid $20, so you should only use it for emergencies, but it's small and it's worth pretty much nothing, so if you ever need to, you can hide it. And you can use it to call me. Ned snatches the phone back, flips it open, and points to the number 1, which he has colored in with a red Sharpie. Panic button, he says. I did it during study hall. There's a tiny tracker inside. You remember the robotics camp I did 2 summers ago? I made a bunch of them for my drones, so if you press it, your location gets sent straight to my phone. That way if you ever can't call me I'll still know where you are. It's Peter's turn. Tears well up in his eyes before he can help himself. This is Peter swallows. I've really missed you, Ned. Ned hugs him again. It's briefer than the one in the elevator, but just as good. I will see you, says Ned, at school. Which is just, he pulls away and makes the universal sign for mind-blowing. He looks up at the building they've just left. Skip is actually pretty cool, isn't he? A small shiver runs up the length of Peter's spine, just like when Skip took his hand last night. Irrational. Isn't it? Yeah, says Peter, I guess he is. Ned immediately resumes his barrage of text messages and email the second Peter is back in the apartment, and since Skip is in the kitchen, Peter retreats to his room to slowly fill Ned in on the events of the last few months. Ned's righteous indignation on his behalf is a panacea for his throbbing hand and the lingering disbelief about the halfway house, disbelief that it happened at all, as well as disbelief that he is actually out but somehow doesn't soothe the buzz in the back of his skull, nor the chittering little ghoul on his shoulder. Peter knows he is supposed to feel safe now, but somehow he feels even more on edge than he did at the halfway house. He keeps expecting his social worker to pop up and tell him there's been an enormous mistake. Which is why when Skip actually does pop into his room about 30 minutes after Ned leaves, Peter jumps so hard he almost falls off the bed. He scrambles to his feet, stuffing the Stark phone into his back pocket alongside the burner phone, heat rising on the back of his neck. Skip doesn't laugh though. He looks Peter up and down, the way he did last night, and says, "Come into the living room for a minute. I want you to meet the girls." Peter follows him back to the living area, where the babysitter from last night, B, is helping the girls out of their backpacks and rain boots. The twins are perfectly identical, down to their matching outfits, dresses slathered in pictures of horses over pink leggings, but Peter knows which one is Lily right away, because as soon as she sees him she gasps, flails out of her jacket, and wraps her arms around his knees. "You aren't sleeping, so I'm allowed to do this now," she informs him. "Emma. New brother, Emma." "Hey, Lily." Peter puts a hand on her head and feels, for the first time since she sneaked into his room that morning, calm. Kids, at least, he can handle. Kids don't drink and carry around rolled-up magazines in case they want to swat you like you're a poisonous insect. Kids don't put locks on the front door and the refrigerator and sneer at you like they wish you were dead every time they're in the same room. Kids are safe. "Is this your sister?" "Emma, come say hi." "Come on." But where her sister is all enthusiasm, Emma shrinks behind B the moment Peter looks at her. Despite all Lily's bright-eyed babbling and easy trust, it appears Emma does not feel the same way about Peter as Peter does about her. She peers at him with a dark, cautious expression, her hands wrapped in B's coat until the babysitter gently untangles them. "Sorry, says B. "And sorry, Mr. Westcott. I have homework." "It's fine, B. Thanks for hanging with them while I sorted Peter out. There'll be a little extra in your next check." Skip steps forward, takes Emma's hand, and guides her out from behind B, who smiles at Peter as she takes her leave. He feels himself blush furiously, but he can't do anything about it, as he's currently chained to his spot by Lily. Emma follows Skip without objection, but as soon as the barrier between her and Peter is gone, she sticks her thumb in her mouth, making her look much younger than 7. She doesn't take her eyes off Peter as Skip leads her to the living room, where he sits her on the couch and hands her a tablet. Only when it's on her lap and playing some garishly bright cartoon does Emma look away, though Peter notices her eyes flicker onto him occasionally even as she becomes absorbed in the show. "Don't feel bad," says Lily. "She's always like that. I want to show you my room, come on." Lily unravels her arms from around Peter's knees and takes his hand. Says Peter, "is it okay with your dad?" "He's your dad too, silly." Peter's flush deepens, but this time it has nothing to do with B. Skip, who is already making his way back to the kitchen, says, "I'm Peter's foster father, Lily, but I'm not his dad. He'll call me Skip like DeMarcus did." And to answer your next question, yes, you may show Peter your room. Dinner's on in 20. Lily redoubles her grip on Peter's hand and pulls him down the hall. "You and me," she says, "are gonna be best friends." Peter glances over his shoulder just before Lily drags him around the corner. Emma watches them go. The rest of the evening passes in a surreal blur. Lily shows him the room she shares with Emma. She introduces him to each of her toys individually, and talks so steadily that there is virtually no pressure on Peter to respond, which he finds is a welcome relief. Despite having slept the night and most of the day, he feels fatigued almost to the point of disconnectedness, like he's in a waking dream. The feeling intensifies at dinner. Skip has made pasta and chicken. Peter notices Skip gives him the most generous portion. Peter is grateful at first, then confused. The moment he begins to eat, his mouth goes dry. He thinks of Felipe and Arnold and his stomach flips. Peter only manages to finish his plate because he can see Skip checking up on him out of the corner of his eye, and then the pasta sits like cement in his belly. It's a relief when Skip excuses them, and not just because of the weirdness with his food. Emma still hasn't said a word, though she did stare at him throughout the meal with watchful, distrustful eyes. When Peter gets back to his room, he is surprised when he looks down and sees he has a dinner roll clutched in one hand. He doesn't remember taking it. But rather than bring it back to the kitchen, he finds a plastic bag in one of his desk drawers and zips the roll inside. He sticks it on the highest shelf in his closet, behind a stack of t-shirts Skip left there for him, and then scrambles into bed and pulls the covers to his chin. "What's wrong with me?" he whispers. For once, the darkness does not reply. As he hands Peter the stack of tests, Principal Morita says, "I'm glad to give you this opportunity, Peter, but I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Mr. Westcott when he called me. There aren't going to be second chances here. Midtown takes academia seriously, but beyond grades, we also expect a level of behavior that reflects the values and ethics of our school. Understand?" Peter understands very clearly. Principal Morita has read his file. "I'm the infamous Peter Parker," he thinks as he nods. He gets it. He'd probably be wary around himself too, if he believed some of the stuff Principal Morita has read about him. But still, Peter can't help the flush of satisfaction that rises when Principal Morita returns with a stack of graded scantrons, wearing a faintly concealed expression of disbelief. "This probably goes without saying, Mr. Parker," says Morita, "but welcome to Midtown." After they have him sit for his tests, it takes the school another week to set Peter up to actually attend. It takes Peter longer than that to get used to the fact that he can go outside whenever he wants. Every time he approaches Skip to ask if he can walk around the neighborhood or go to the library or meet Ned after school, he feels nauseated with worry, and every time Skip says yes, it's like someone has pulled a ripcord on muscles he didn't even realize he was holding taut, allowing him to loosen up and breathe. Noticing he does this doesn't get rid of it, though it does add a healthy dose of shame to the confusing cocktail of his emotions. The shame isn't aided by the growing pile of food in Peter's closet. After that first night, he discovered an attic hatch in the ceiling, and the little crawl space contained therein has become the hiding space for his stash. Peter quickly becomes strategic about what he takes. It's mostly sealed food now, cans of soup and bags of chips or cookies, things that will last and are small enough Skip won't notice they're missing, even though Peter knows Skip would probably just give them to him if he asked. He doesn't know why he does this either. He only knows the little ghoul on his shoulder purrs every time he adds to his pile. Lately, it's the only time it's quiet. Yet for all the tension, things are, for the first time in almost as long as Peter can remember, good. He has a room all to himself. He and Ned talk constantly when they aren't meeting up after school, planning all of the things they're going to do when Peter starts his classes. When Peter gets home in the afternoons, he reads on his phone and watches TV in the living room and plays with Lily when she gets home from one of the many after-school programs she and Emma are enrolled in. Lily adores him, and Peter adores her back. She's bright and precocious, and she is the only person in his life who not only knows nothing about his past, but doesn't care even one bit. She's a relief he didn't know he needed, but now that he has it, he wouldn't give it up for the world. Emma, on the other hand, still won't have anything to do with him. Skip assures him it's normal. Don't take it personally, he says. She's been like this ever since they came to live here. We're working on it, but it's not yours to worry about, okay? Peter does worry. The look in Emma's eyes when she's watching him reminds him of the look in Felipe's the night he told Peter about Marina and the stolen laundry detergent. But Skip's right. There's nothing he can do to convince her he isn't a threat except to not be one. So Peter smiles and keeps his distance whenever they're in the same room, and for now it seems like it's enough. At the very least, she no longer hides whenever she sees him. As for Skip is great. From the first he has made it clear that he's available should Peter ever want to talk, but he hasn't once been overbearing. Since he doesn't work, he spends most mornings volunteering with the foster program, and his afternoons are for the girls and their piano lessons and gymnastics and soccer teams. At first, Peter is amazed that Skip leaves him all alone in the area apartment, surrounded by expensive things. But when he voices these concerns, Skip just says, "You've been very trustworthy so far, Peter. I'd prefer to bet on your goodness and be disappointed than set an unfair precedent of strictness. You won't disappoint me, will you?" Peter won't. The more he realizes that his freedom is real, the more desperate he is to keep it. The more approval Skip gives him, the more he craves. It's why he doesn't tell Skip about the little voice, or about the stash of food. Besides, the voices are wrong. Whatever is making him add to the stash is wrong. And maybe, just maybe, Felipe was wrong too. Maybe things can turn out okay. Maybe Peter doesn't have to constantly wonder about how this recent streak of good luck will unravel. And maybe the hint of a shudder Peter still feels when he catches Skip looking at him when he thinks Peter isn't paying attention is just another manifestation of the same irrationality, not evidence of something bad, just evidence that Peter himself is a little bit broken. And if that's the case, he's not going to risk this sudden, inexplicable fortune by admitting it. Because even if Felipe was wrong, and even if good things do happen, he was right about one thing. Peter can take care of himself. The night before school starts, Peter receives a surprise. Having spent the day at the library, feeding an irrational worry that, despite his test scores, he will be behind everyone who had the benefit of an 8th grade education that took place in an actual school, Peter arrives at the apartment that evening to find Skip, the girls, and Ned gathered around a birthday cake. "Surprise!" they all shout. And so Peter, flushing, sits down to his first birthday celebration since Ben died. "Did we surprise you?" Lily asks, crawling into Peter's lap after he blows out the candles. "Daddy didn't tell me either because he said I'd ruin it." "Your dad's pretty wise," says Peter. "And yeah, considering my birthday was 2 months ago, I'd say I'm very surprised." "It was Ned's idea," says Skip. He's leaning back in his chair, sipping a beer and watching Peter with a lopsided grin. "He told me you hadn't had a proper party. He set this all up, I'm just the money man." "Happy birthday," says Ned. "And before you get all, oh Ned, you're too nice, you do too much, yes I am and yes I do. You can repay me by throwing me an awesome surprise party on my birthday." The new Star Wars comes out right around then, hint, hint. Happy 14th, Peter, says Skip. It is, by far, the best night Peter has had since Ben died. They eat cake, play charades, exchange stories, make popcorn. Even Emma joins in for a round of Candyland, though she lets a more than willing Lily take charge of drawing her cards and moving her piece. After the girls go to sleep, Peter and Ned stay up playing video games and losing track of the time, until finally Ned's mom calls, and he bids Peter farewell. See you at school, dude, Ned says as he leaves. He makes the mind-blown sign again. Peter's mind is blown. He's full of cake and snacks. He's sleepy and happy, and tomorrow he's going to a real school, where he will attend real classes with his best friend. Peter grins as he closes the door behind Ned, turns around and Skip is standing right behind him. Peter jumps, grin sliding off, and takes a step back before he can help himself. Skip is much closer than he usually is, and now that he's nearby, Peter can smell the beer on his breath. Skip's had one in his hand all night, but Peter didn't even think about it until now. The smell of bitter yeast makes Peter's head spin with memories of Mrs. Arlington. He gulps and forces himself to smile. This isn't the Arlingtons. Plenty of adults drink. Peter has seen Skip have a drink with dinner on more than one occasion, though, granted, not usually more than one. Now Skip is clearly a little drunk. His eyes are just slightly out of focus as he smiles down at Peter. Thanks for the party, Peter says. It was really great. He's hoping Skip will step aside, let him go to bed. Instead, he steps closer. You deserve it, you know. The ghoul is hissing in his ears. Skip is too close, but Peter forces himself to smile wider, to silence it. Thanks, Skip. I should get ready for bed. I see you, you know. Skip presses on, his voice slurring just slightly. You keep your chin up, Peter, but I see how hard this is for you, all this newness. I just think you should know, you're a really remarkable kid. Just really remarkable. After all you've been through, and you're so intelligent, so good with the girls, you should be so proud of yourself. I know I am. Thank you. But before Peter can try to slip around him, Skip leans forward and pulls Peter into a hug. It's not like Ben's hugs. It's not a quick, affectionate squeeze or a reassuring touch. Skip presses his whole body against Peter's, and since Skip is so much bigger, so much taller, Peter is completely enveloped by it, his arms pinned to his sides. And Skip doesn't let go right away. He hangs on, increasing the pressure and running one hand up and down the length of Peter's back. Every muscle in Peter's body goes rigid. He can't move, he can't even draw a breath. Too close, too close, too close. Just when Peter thinks he might snap, Skip inhales deeply, sighs, and releases him. Go to bed, Peter, he says. You've got a big day ahead of you tomorrow. Does Peter imagine it, or does Skip sound faintly disappointed? He doesn't pause long enough to think about it. Heart pounding, still holding his breath, Peter practically runs for his room, where he shuts his door behind him before he allows himself to draw a gulp of air. For the first time, Peter notices there isn't a lock on his door. Get a hold of yourself, Parker, he murmurs. Come on, you're being irrational. Aren't I? He is. He's being irrational. This is like the food, he's reacting to something that isn't there. There is plenty of food in the house and hugs are normal, a normal way to show affection. He is the one who isn't normal, and if he doesn't clamp down on this, he's going to lose everything right when things are finally starting to look up. You're being crazy, he says to himself. Good things don't happen to Peter Parker. Peter puts his pajamas on quickly and climbs into bed, drawing his blankets up to his chin. He doesn't fall asleep for a long time. He wakes again less than an hour later. Down the hall, someone is screaming. Peter leaps out of bed before he is fully awake. His legs tangle in the sheets and he falls to his knees painfully, bruising them, but he doesn't pause to think about it. Back on his feet, Peter charges out of his room and down the hall, where the girl's door is always left slightly ajar. He bursts in without thinking, only realizing that he is barefoot and unarmed. When he fumbles for the light switch and braces himself to see nothing. It's just Lily and Emma, both sitting up in their beds. Lily is the one who is screaming. For a second Peter thinks he's mixing them up. He's never seen Lily be anything but effervescent, happy and giggling. But any doubt is washed away when she reaches for him, still sobbing, and says, "Peter." Peter crosses the room and wraps his arms around her. Lily latches on immediately, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his torso, so Peter lifts her out of bed and turns around to sit on it, holding her in his lap. "What happened?" he says. "Lily, are you hurt?" But Lily is crying too hard to speak, so Peter holds onto her, making shushing noises and trying to calm his own hammering heart. Over Lily's shoulder, he looks at Emma. She's not crying, but she is pale and looks even smaller than she normally does, her shoulders hunched up to her ears, her blanket clutched to her chest. "Are you okay, Emma?" he says. Emma hesitates, then nods. "She's not." Lily sobs. "She's not, they were hurting her." "Shoo, Lily, it's okay. It's okay, look, Emma's fine. She's okay." Peter gets to his feet and turns around, so that Lily can see Emma over his shoulder. He stands like that until Lily's sobs turn to hiccups. "Shoo, see," he says. "See, she's okay." "Okay." Lily nods against his cheek, and Peter turns around again. He receives a start. Skip is standing in the doorway. Peter gets the same crumpled feeling in his stomach he had when Lily snuck into his room the first morning, and when Ned appeared unannounced in the living room. Skip's face is blank for a moment, and the unreadability of his expression is more unnerving than anger would be. Peter doesn't know how to brace himself. Then Skip smiles. "Hey girlies," he says, stepping into the room. "Bad night." Lily gasps and disentangles herself from around Peter's waist. She runs into Skip's arms and he scoops her up. "Ah, baby, it's all right," he says. It's okay, it's okay. It's just one of your nightmares, it's not real." Peter suddenly feels useless. He stands at the center of the room, arms empty, inexplicably embarrassed, still battling that first instinct of fight or flight. His adrenaline is pounding, but his brain is catching up to the situation. No danger. Just a bad dream. Skip catches his eye. "I'm sorry, Peter, I was out like a light. I should have been quicker. You can go back to bed." Peter blinks, then looks at Emma. She is still watching him. "Are you okay?" he asks again. He doesn't want to leave without making sure. Emma nods again, and then, to Peter's shock, whispers the first words she said to him since he arrived. "I'm okay." "Sorry, I'll just..." Face red, Peter starts to leave. Skip puts a hand on his shoulder as he passes. There is a brief, lighting impulse to throw the hand off. Peter stops himself just short of jerking back. Instead he goes stiff, just like he did under the weight of Skip's hug. But Skip doesn't pull him in this time. He just squeezes Peter's shoulder, once, and then drops his hand. "We'll talk in the morning," he says softly. Peter nods, trying not to make his hesitance obvious as he skirts around him. Skip shuts the door. Peter wakes for his first day of school feeling like he hasn't rested at all. He set his alarm to go off early, afraid he would oversleep, but now he stays in bed until the last possible moment, mulling over the events of the last 24 hours and dreading the moment he has to go out into the kitchen, where he can hear Skip making breakfast. It was just a hug. Just a friendly squeeze of the shoulder. Just a nightmare, and for once the nightmare wasn't his. But Peter feels dread. Constant, low-grade, nauseating dread. It's like being back at the Arlingtons, waiting for the next blow to fall. It's like hearing Felipe's ems of hunger in the middle of the night, or sitting in the dark, listening for the door to signal that Ben was home from the late shift. Broken, broken, broken. Is this how he's going to be for the rest of his life? Irrational. "Peter?" At Skip's call, Peter stops dallying. He grabs the backpack Skip bought for him, stuffs the burner phone in his back pocket and the Stark phone in the front, and heads into the kitchen. Bea is there already, helping the girls into their coats. Peter pauses, wondering if he's ruined something by seeing Lily so vulnerable, if he's messed everything up by sticking his nose where it didn't belong. "Peter!" Lily runs to him, hugs his legs. Good morning. Daddy told me to tell you to have a good first day at school, so have a good day, okay?" Before Peter can answer, she skips back to Bea. Peter blinks. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees Skip set his mouth in a grim line. "Thanks, Lily," Peter says. I hope you have a good day too. You and Emma. Something happens then, something that is both unexpected and affirms that Peter did not hallucinate the events of last night. Emma steps forward, hugs him briefly, and hurries back to B. There is a moment of shared shock where Peter, B, and Skip exchange raised eyebrows, and then Skip steps forward, clearing his throat. Okay girls. Off you go. B snaps out of it. She smiles at Peter and shuffles the girls out the door, leaving him alone with Skip. Come sit down, Skip says. Peter does, apprehensive. Skip sets a plate of fresh fruit and yogurt in front of him. Peter's fingers twitch, but he doesn't pick up his spoon, just watches while Skip takes the seat across from him. I owe you an apology, says Skip quietly. No, it's okay. I'm for what? For last night, says Skip. I had a little too much to drink. I shouldn't have slept through Lily's nightmare. Thank you for taking care of her until I got there. Peter is relieved he isn't in trouble, but still, his stomach won't settle. He finds himself fighting the urge to pocket the apples on his plate, and he folds his hands in his lap too. Still them. Does that happen a lot? He says. I mean, is she okay? I just wouldn't have expected it, I guess. Not from Lily. Skip sighs. I try not to talk about it with my boys until I'm sure they're going to fit in, he says. The girls are in a sensitive position, and kids can be thoughtless. I don't like to risk triggering their episodes. But I think you deserve an explanation. And I think you've proven you have the girls' best interests at heart. Did something happen to them? Skip nods. I know you're no stranger to the cruelties of the world, Peter, but even so, I don't want to burden you, and on your first day of school. No, it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but I want to know. I want to help. Skip smiles, but a little sadly. You are a helper, aren't you? I'm seeing that more and more. He sighs. The smile disappears. Peter, those girls come from a very troubled background. Their birth parents were not equipped, to say the least. Their mother was addicted to heroin, and so the girls were born addicted as well. She abandoned them at the hospital, and for the first few years of their lives they were bounced between family members and foster homes. Sometimes I thank the stars I don't know all the details of what happened to them, but I know enough to say that they were very badly abused by their first homes. They were too young to remember most of it, but Emma has scars on her back in the shape of cigarette burns, and for the first year I had them Lily would scream like she was being tortured any time she saw a man with a beard. Things like that leave a mark, even when they don't leave a memory. Peter's hands are shaking. Bad things just happen. They shouldn't. The idea that anyone could do something like that to those girls is sickening. Skip gives Peter a second to compose himself before he goes on. There were a few families before me, he says, who tried with the girls. Good people. Good intentions. But even though the girls don't really remember what happened to them when they were little, abuse has invisible effects. Their behavior was, well, to put it plainly, Peter, it was nightmarish. Screaming fits, violence, sleeplessness. They would pull their own hair out, attack anyone who tried to stop them. Attack their foster siblings. Attack their foster parents. When the foster program approached me about taking them in, it was an absolute last resort. My focus was on teenage boys, like yourself, and I admit the thought of taking two potentially dangerous young girls was daunting. But I had enough experience with difficult cases at that point, and besides they had nowhere else to go. Perhaps it sounds strange, but I felt it was my duty, I suppose, to look out for them. You gotta look out for yourself, Pedro. That's not right, Felipe. Sometimes you have to look out for other people. Otherwise things like this happen. Otherwise people shoot unarmed men in alleyways and tell kids they can't eat and put cigarettes out on little girls' backs. And then it can't just be about me. All at once, the embarrassment from last night returns, but this time it is not because he feels like an intruder on a private moment. It is because he was suspicious. Suspicious of Skip last night when he hugged Peter. Suspicious again when he first heard Lily scream. Broken. But it isn't Skip. It's him. Peter croaks. God, I'm so sorry. No. I'm not telling you because I want you to feel bad, Peter. I told you I want to apologize. The girls and I have done a lot of work in the last 2 years, but as you can see there's a ways to go. They handle it differently. Emma, well, you see how she is, she doesn't trust anybody except me and B. And you now, it seems. Underneath the shame, a flicker of pride. And Lily, Skip goes on, Lily is a spitfire. You know. But underneath all that spunk, her way of coping is by blocking things out. The nightmares are a result, though I thought we had them mostly under control. Last night was probably my fault too. I let her have too much birthday cake. Too much sugar. I'm sorry, you must have slept terribly. Peter shakes his head. I slept fine, he lies. I was just worried. I know. I meant what I said last night, Peter. You're an excellent kid. Peter smiles again, a little wider this time. He feels shaky with relief his fears were unfounded. Everything is okay. It's just his brain, making mountains out of molehills, his wires all jumbled up, receiving too many signals. He can get this under control, and everything will be fine. Can I? Peter swallows. Can I help with the girls? At all? Is there anything I can do? Skip grins. All you have to do, he says, is keep being the wonderful older brother you've been so far. And concentrate on your schoolwork. Which, speaking of, your first day starts in 20 minutes. I've almost made you late. Come on, I'll drive you. They both get to their feet. Peter is about to head for the door, but before he can, Skip pulls him into another hug. The reassurance of the last 10 minutes slides away. Skip squeezes just a little too tight, almost like he is trying to show Peter how strong he is, and suddenly Peter is not in the kitchen anymore. He is in the back seat of a crumpled car. He is lying in the bed under the stairs. He is crammed into a corner, trying to avoid Ryan's fists. Too close. And then it ends. Skip releases him. Rubs his hands up and down Peter's arms once. Walks away. Peter shakes his head. He presses his hands into his eyes, presses the unwelcome memories away. He gets a hold of himself. And he goes to school. No way. This is a violation of our constitutional right to safety, or something. Peter feels heat rise in the back of his neck as he makes his way to his seat and drops into it, resisting the urge to look around. He can feel every pair of eyes in the room on him, every pair, that is, except Flash's, which are almost as wide as his gawping mouth, and are currently fixed on the teacher, who has just introduced Peter to the class. If you're done with the melodramatics, Flash, she says, and she returns her attention to the whiteboard. We were learning about covalent bonds. Peter doesn't miss the look she gives him as he turns, however. She has just as many doubts as Flash. Even though he didn't expect anything more, it still stings. He doesn't have time to dwell on it. Flash, who is seated one row ahead of Peter, whips around to face him. How did you manage to weasel your way back in here, Parker? He demands. Is it true you pushed an old lady off a fire escape? Says the blonde girl sitting next to him. Peter groans, but the girl, far from deterred by Peter's imagined violent streak, sticks a hand out. Betty Brant, she says. Midtown High Morning Announcements, editor of the Daily Happenings portion of the school newspaper. Any chance I could get an interview? The prison system is broken, Peter, and most of the kids here are so privileged. They could use an insider's perspective on what juvie is really like. You are not actually encouraging him right now, Flash hisses. Parker's a total SCK up goody two-shoes brown noser, and he's like an attempted murderer. I'm complaining to the school board. He and Betty Brant start bickering in low whispers. It's distracting enough that Peter, who is actually pretty determined to prove he's not a dangerous delinquent, and doesn't want to start his first day falling behind in class because of Flash of all people, leans forward. Flash, he whispers, are you gonna shut up long enough for me to start being a goody two-shoes brown-nosing SEK up? Or am I going to have to violate your constitutional right to safety to make you? Flash turns red and opens his mouth, but before he can make his indignant retort, he's cut off by a snort of laughter. Peter turns around. The girl behind him is smirking behind a sheaf of dark, curly hair. He starts to smile at her, relieved that one person, at least, isn't terrified of him, but before he can make eye contact she buries her nose in a copy of Paradise Lost, which is open on her desk. Since Mr. Parker is confident enough on his first day to not pay attention, says the teacher, perhaps he would like to tell us what a banana bond is? Peter turns around, his ears burning. Flash smirks until Peter gets the question right. Peter tries to catch the girl's eye at the end of class. Lord knows he could use any friend he can get, but she is out the door the second the bell rings, head bent, arms full of books. The bookish girl's rejection turns out to be a good predictor of the rest of the day, at least in terms of how the rest of the school treats Peter. By third PRD, he's almost missing the school he went to when he lived with the Arlingtons. The kids there might have gone out of their way to torment him, but at least they acknowledged his existence. I think I might have died. In my sleep, he says when he finds Ned in the lunchroom. Am I a ghost? Am I invisible? Please tell me you can see me. By way of response, Ned offers up their secret handshake, which draws the first smile Peter's worn all morning. They take their lunches to the corner of the cafeteria, and Ned, bless him, holds his head high when Peter's ability to repel eye contact turns out to be contagious. They'll get over it, he says as they take their seats. You're just the rumor of the week. Wait until someone rips their pants in gym class or gets caught making out in the band hall, they'll forget all about you. Maybe. Peter glances over his shoulder, and the mousy sophomore behind him spills her milk. She jumps so hard. This is weird though. I'm used to being the punching bag. Now everyone is acting like I'm gonna beat them up for their lunch money. And that's a bad thing? Ned is rummaging in his backpack. You're the closest thing to a badass the school has ever seen. On it, my man. Aha. He emerges from his bag with a fistful of pamphlets, which he shoves at Peter. Peter plucks one off the top. It has a Technicolor picture of a Dalek, and Peter reads aloud, Robotics Club, exterminate the competition at this year's regionals. He raises an eyebrow at Ned. Is this how I own my badassery? In fact, it is. Remember how I'm definitely the best friend and possibly the greatest human being you've ever known? These are all of the after-school activities my mom is making me take. I thought, since you love me so very much, you might make this very extensive list of extracurriculars more bearable by possibly picking one or two that you could. Yeah, dude, I'm in, says Peter, unhesitating. For all of it. For real. Ned, who was clearly gearing up for more of a fight, practically sags with relief. Oh my God, you have no idea how much better band practice is going to be with you there. My mom is making me play the tuba. The tuba, Peter, like I'm not enough of a are you okay? Peter has gone still. In shuffling through the pamphlets, he's just come across one for an after-school literacy program, wherein the older kids apparently walk down to the elementary school to read with fourth graders. Where the red fern grows features prominently on the front. Says Ned, you don't have to do all of them, Peter. If reading isn't your thing. No, I want to. I don't want to be home all the time. And why is that? Think, Peter. Why is that? Because something is wrong with me. Okay, are you sure you're okay? Peter runs a hand over the pamphlets, fidgets. Now he is the one avoiding Ned's eye. Do you think Ben would have? Do you think he'd like Skip? Oh, why do you ask? Has he been treating you okay? Yeah, he's been great. Like really, really nice. I guess it weirds me out a little. Like maybe he's being too nice. I guess I just feel like I don't deserve it. Or something. Peter. Ned tugs the pamphlet out of Peter's hand, forcing him to look up. You've been through so much, dude. Like, a genuinely crazy amount of crap. I think it makes sense you'd be a little, crisscrossed. But people are supposed to be nice to you. You know that, right? Peter smiles. It's an effort, but once it's on his face it comes easier. Thanks, Ned, he says. Ned relaxes. He smiles back. Of course. You know I've always got you, man. Now if you're done being morose, please let me tell you about the decathlon team captain. That is one club you're going to thank me for. Slowly, Peter's life begins to come back together. He joins band and robotics club and mathletes and decathlon, and immediately develops a raging crush on the captain, just as Ned predicted. After he turns in a few homework assignments, most of his teachers forget their initial wariness and stop watching him out of the corners of their eyes when they think he won't notice. It takes a little longer for the students, but after a month has gone by and Peter hasn't pulled a shiv on anyone, they start to lose interest. After 6 weeks, everyone except Flash treats him like any other lowly freshman, and Peter can't bring himself to care too much about that, as Flash has always treated him like dirt. He's busy. He's excelling at school. He has Ned. It's almost like it was before, except that the negative space left in Ben's absence seems just a little deeper now, surrounded as he is by reminders of the life he used to have with his uncle. Deeper, but not sharper. Just as with his parents, the edge of grief is beginning to wear off. Things at the apartment have calmed down too. Since that first nightmare, Lily has slept soundly through the night, and as the weeks wear on, Peter becomes more and more convinced that his initial wariness about Skip was just a product of some weird reaction to the circumstances in which he came to live with him. Besides a few uncomfortable hugs, a few lingering stares, Skip is the definition of the perfect parent: attentive, sympathetic, available. He won't ever be Ben, but Peter's appreciation for Skip grows every time he sees a packed lunch waiting for him on the counter, or a text on his phone, letting him know not to stay out too late, letting him know he's missed. Peter loves the girls. He loves them almost as much as he loved Ben, loves them so much it scares him a little. They love him right back. Lily, vivacious as ever, Emma, quieter, but warming to him a little more each day. They both kiss him on the cheek before bed each night, now. Just as with his grief for Ben, Peter's skittishness starts to wear off. He sleeps better. He doesn't steal food as much, only when he's stressed about a test, and once before his first decathlon meet, but otherwise his little pile stagnates. The ghoul on his shoulder has even receded, its little whispered warnings growing quieter and quieter until Peter almost doesn't hear them at all anymore. He starts to believe once again that everything is going to be okay. Which is, of course, when everything falls apart. Peter gets home late that evening. It's Friday, and Liz had kept them late at practice to prepare for regionals, which are next weekend. Skip and the girls have family therapy on Fridays, so Peter takes the train home, expecting to find an empty apartment when he arrives. He's looking forward to having the television to himself. There's only so much Peppa Pig a guy can stand, but when he steps through the front door, he's surprised to find Skip on the couch, watching ESPN on mute with a sleeping girl tucked to each side. Skip makes a shushing sign before Peter can slam the door. Peter catches it. He slips his shoes off before he steps onto the hardwood, then tiptoes closer. Standing over the couch, he can see tear tracks on each of the girls' faces. "Tough session," Skip whispers. "We had to cut it short. We've been watching Disney movies all night to get them to calm down. They just fell asleep in the middle of Moana. Can you help me get them to bed?" Peter scoops Emma into his arms, careful not to jostle, while Skip props Lily up on his shoulder. Together they carry them down the hall and place them, fully clothed, in their respective beds. Emma's face scrunches up as Peter sets her down, but she doesn't wake, just rolls over and starts to seck her thumb in her sleep. He looks up when he senses Skip watching him. Skip nods toward the kitchen. "Are they going to be okay?" Peter asks, taking a seat at the dining table while Skip rummages in the fridge. He emerges with a beer, takes a long sip before sitting across from Peter and sighing. "They'll be fine," he says. "Sometimes therapy is like drawing poison out of a wound. It's painful but necessary. But dimmin' if I don't hate seeing those girls cry." He takes another swig. "Thanks for your help, Peter. I thought I was going to lose feeling in both my arms before you showed up." "Oh yeah, I'm just glad they're okay." "They will be. But how are you? You look a little stressed yourself." Peter shrugs. "It's just the meet coming up. Even Mr. Harrington is freaking out, because I guess Midtown always qualifies for state, so it's like upholding a legacy. A lot of pressure, I dunno." Peter expects Skip to give him the usual spiel about how smart he is, how lucky the decathlon team is to have him, a familiar refrain by now, but instead, Skip considers Peter for a drawn-out moment, and then slides the beer across the table toward him. Peter laughs, thinking it must be a corny dad joke, but the laughter fades quickly when he sees the look on Skip's face, serious, measured. Watching Peter like he's studying him. "Try it," he says. "It tastes better than it smells." Peter's heart starts to beat harder, though he cannot, at first, say why. You aren't serious, are you? Is this some kind of test?" Now Skip laughs, but there's no humor in it. All at once, the ghoul reappears. Its hackles are raised. No test, Pete. First beer is a big milestone in a young man's life, and I think you've proven you're mature enough to handle it. I'd like to be the one to give you your first taste. Go ahead. Peter doesn't want to, but something in the edge of Skip's voice, in the way he's continued to look at Peter's face while they've been talking, makes him take the bottle and take a quick, tiny mouthful. It's much, much worse than it smells. Peter almost chokes on it. He manages to swallow, but comes up sputtering, coughing and wiping his mouth on the back of his hand. Skip, laughing for real now, takes the beer out of his hand before Peter can spill it. Okay, he says, maybe not quite yet. You really are still a little kid in some ways, aren't you? Peter, whose eyes are already watering, tries not to show how much that stings. Skip has never spoken to him like this before. He doesn't understand what's going on. No, you don't understand, do you? Because you never listen to me, you never. Peter gets abruptly to his feet. I have to brush my teeth, he says. Skip leans back in his chair, taking another sip of the beer. Of course, he says. You sleep well, Peter. Peter almost trips over himself as he heads to his room, heart pounding, the little voice shrieking in his ear. Just like the night of the hug, it takes Peter a long time to fall asleep. Just like the night of the hug, he is woken by a high-pitched sound. But this time it is not Lily screaming, woken by a nightmare. It is the sound of his door, hinges creaking as it opens. Peter sits up but doesn't get out of bed. Someone is standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light shining in from the hallway. For just a second, Peter thinks he must be having a nightmare, because this figure seems too large to be a man, and it is swaying slightly, like it's having trouble keeping his feet. Then Skip staggers out of the glare and into Peter's bedroom. But this isn't Skip as Peter has ever seen him. Even in the darkness, Peter can see that his eyes are out of focus, can smell the tidal wave of grain alcohol that is his breath. Skip is not just tipsy this time, he is stone-cold drunk. Before Peter can say anything, Skip crosses the rest of the distance between them and sits on the edge of his bed. Peter flinches away. There is a siren in his head, and it is wailing, too close, too close, too close, but he is paralyzed. He doesn't even think to stand up. Skip, he whispers. Is everything okay? Skip lists from side to side slightly, trying to catch Peter in the crosshairs of his vision. When he does, he smirks. Look at you, Skip slurs. Always so concerned about everyone else. Always so nice. When you came to me, I thought you would be so different. More like the other boys. They always fought me, you know. Them I had to teach. But you, not you. You're different. You're better. Skip, says Peter, his voice growing louder even as he struggles to maintain his whisper. I think you should go back to bed. I think you had too much. And then Skip is on top of him. It happens so fast Peter doesn't even have time to think about running, or trying to push him off, not that he could if he tried. 1 second he is sitting up, the next he is sinking into the mattress under the full weight of Skip's body while the older man wraps his arms around him, holds him there. Skip has at least 80 pounds on Peter. He is completely pinned. Peter's mind goes blank with panic. He can't comprehend what's happening, can't even begin to fathom it. All he knows is that he needs to get away, needs to get this weight off of him so he can take a breath. Too close, too close, too close. So he says, "Get off, Skip, please get off me, please, get." Skip puts a hand over his mouth. "Shut up," he whispers. "Don't pretend you don't want this. You've always been such a nice boy." On top of him, Skip starts to move his hips. Finally, Peter understands. "Are you happy, Peter? Are you happy? Are you